Chapter 47. Chushua looked at this scene with her mouth agape. Today, Zhongsho and this mutated octopus beast gave her too many surprises. So many that her little brain couldn't fit it all in. Looking at Little Gold's current situation, it was more like a spiritual weapon than a protector beast. Zhongsho's lips curled up. His fingers shook slightly, and a black talisman knife appeared between his fingers. Not only were there cloud patterns flashing within the knife body, there was also a slight wind blowing around. This caused the aura of the talisman knife to become more and more dangerous. He kept the talisman knife and took out the pine pattern wind sword. Instantly, a layer of silver-white color spread from his palm to the sword body until it completely covered the sword. Zhongsho smiled, his eyes filled with joy. Be it the ability to swallow or the ability to purify, they were all Little Gold's abilities. Changing into all things was the ability that Little Gold had awakened after reaching grade 2. The current Little Gold could not only make the pine pattern wind sword stronger. The spirit channels in his body were like a natural talisman formation, allowing Zhongsho to perfectly use the wind controlling ability of the green pearl. If the situation was dangerous, he could use it to replace the original wind accumulating ball as the spiritual core of the wind wall formation. However, this ability was still not strong and could at most be used as a support. After reaching grade 4, its ability to change into all things would start to show. With a slight thought, Little Gold knew what he was thinking. The silver-white color covering his arm instantly retracted back into his sleeves. At this moment, Zhongsho felt a pungent smell enter his nose. Looking down, his clothes were already drenched, especially his chest, which was seeping out a layer of black mud-like substance. The smell was really strong. Zhongsho's brows furrowed slightly, but then he smiled, glancing at Chu Shui with bad intentions. Counting the days, it was time for the medicinal bath. Coincidentally, he was so tired that he couldn't even move a finger. In the following few days, Zhongsho didn't use the energy swallowing technique. Every day, he would practice the spiritual breathing fist, at least 48 times, no less. There was also the guiding technique, which could be used within 30 times. Even the practice of swordsmanship had been reduced. Apart from strengthening his foundation, he also used this fist technique to control the surging true qi in his body. Occasionally, when he entered a meditative state, he would use all his strength to consolidate the foundation, breath, marrow, and these 3 chakra meridians. Occasionally, he would open up 1 or 2 extra meridians to store his true qi. It caused the number of acupoints he could use outside of his meridians to reach 20, most of them belonging to the water and wind elements. At night, he would use the sky mirror soul shining technique to gather moonlight. He continued to burn his divine soul. The number of bronze mirrors had increased to a total of 16, and Zhongsho had polished the surfaces of the mirrors until they were even smoother. The temperature of the essence sunfire had also increased by 3 times. The so-called soul observation of Spirit Master is to peek into one's own soul and thoughts, or to visualize, to constantly grasp the changes in one's soul consciousness. Similar to the spirit concentration before, it wasn't just the beginning of a Spirit Master's cultivation. Even at the True Star realm, it was homework that one had to do every day. It was similar to how we martial artists observe our own bodies. Maybe because he was too deeply immersed in the path of martial cultivation in his last life. Even if Zhongsho could be considered a soul observation realm Spirit Master and was a dual cultivator, his mindset still hadn't changed. He still treated himself as a martial master. In his last life, in the game, he had already stepped into the celestial realm. In reality, with his average body, he forcefully entered the ascended realm during the era when the spiritual wave was extinguished. All techniques came from the same source. Even if Zhongsho had been walking the path of a martial master, it was still beneficial to his cultivation in terms of soul power. In just a few days, he had made some progress in the process of soul observation. Apart from his soul power accumulation, which was still lacking, he had already roughly grasped the structure of his soul. If one truly calculated, his spirit master cultivation could be considered to have entered the mid to late stages of the soul observation realm. Spirit master cultivation was just like that, focusing more on comprehension and talent. As long as one comprehended each step and did it well, one's realm could rise and reach the heavens in one step. Zhong Shou remembered that during the God Emperor era, spirit masters were the ones who cultivated the fastest. In just a year, he went from the initial spirit focus realm to the return to sun realm. It wasn't like martial cultivation, where one needed to accumulate step by step and progress step by step. In comparison, his current cultivation speed could only be considered average. The only thing that made him slightly pleased was that these few days, under the sky mirror soul shining technique and the 12 god talismans, his soul had recovered to its pure state. The soul power fluctuation caused by forcefully expanding his soul ocean seemed to be showing signs of calming down. If I can maintain such purity, I might be able to directly skip the night wandering realm. I might be able to directly enter the return to sun realm. Thinking about that in his heart, Zhong Shou stopped meditating. When he opened his eyes, the first thread of sunlight shone in from outside the window. His dual meridian body made his stamina weak. Even if his cultivation had entered the martial master realm, it didn't change much. Only his mind was filled up. Meditating for 6 hours this night was even better than sleeping, and all the fatigue in his body was gone. However, the moment he woke up, a strong sense of hunger suddenly attacked him. Rumbling sounds could be heard from his stomach. Zhong Shou couldn't help but smile. The foundation energy, stabilizing and opening up his marrow chakra, caused his appetite to greatly increase. His daily food intake had increased by 3 times. This also meant that his body was improving and the amount of energy he needed had greatly increased. This was why not only did he not need to worry about it, but it was also something to be happy about. I've already dashed for 7 days in this black soil swamp. It is time to stop and rest up. I remember that the most delicious thing here is the black soil crocodile. Legend has it that not only is the meat delicious, but it is also beneficial for training the bones and marrow of martial cultivators, as well as training the skin and bones. Later I can let Uncle Ian catch some nearby. Thinking about that, Zhong Shou frowned, following which he sighed. The feeling of danger from before didn't increase or decrease during these few days. However, it was like maggots in his bones, unable to be shaken off. Recently, he had begun to wonder if this sense of danger was just his imagination. Suddenly, the carriage shook unnoticeably, and then it slowed down. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed, following which he laughed coldly. After waiting for so long, it was finally here. His body flashed as he exited the carriage. When he reached the front of the carriage, he saw Yin Yang and Chu Shui frowning as they looked to the right. Zhong Shou followed their gazes and looked carefully. Roughly 10,000 feet to the right, there was a pack of wolves galloping. At the front were 5 cloud stepping foals, fleeing in the direction of the carriage. On them sat 4 males and 1 female. The males were all dressed up as martial cultivators, but at this moment they were all terrified. As for the female, Zhong Shou looked at her and was startled. Her appearance was like a lotus flower that had just emerged from the water. She was as pretty as jade and peerlessly beautiful. Even when she was fleeing for her life, she was still seductive, making one want to protect her. Her gaze towards him was filled with tears, filled with a pleading look. It made one want to give up their life to help her. Zhong Shou was startled for a moment before he came back to his senses, shaking his head slightly. Don't worry about them. Let's speed up and go around them. Shui was startled, her face showing that she couldn't bear to do so. However, in the end, she placed Zhong Shou's safety first and didn't say a word. Yin Yang's expression turned serious, waving his whip once more. In the air above the 18 cloud stepping foals, there was a sharp sound of the whip breaking through the air. It caused the cloud crossing carriage to suddenly speed up. Chapter 48. Not only was Yin Yang's cultivation high, but his driving skills were also really good. After speeding up, he used the reins to pull lightly to the side. Those 18 horses all turned their heads. The curve wasn't big, but it was enough to avoid the wolf pack in front of them. When the 4 men and 1 woman saw the situation, despair appeared on their faces. A man behind him ran a little slower and was caught up by the pack of wolves. Along with the cloud stepping foal crying out in pain, he and his horse were swallowed by the wolf pack. The other few cloud-stepping foals were panting like they were totally exhausted. That woman's face instantly turned ashen, gritting her teeth as she asked for help. Friends on the carriage, it is fate that we met in the swamp plains. Aren't the 3 of you too cold-blooded and heartless to not save me? If you can save the lives of me and my subordinates, this little girl will definitely repay you with everything she has. I'm willing to give you a grade 6 beast soul stone. She was originally extremely beautiful, but now she was so anxious that she was about to cry, making her look even more pitiful and pitiful. Chu Shui seemed to be touched by the woman's words, hesitating for a moment before she couldn't help but persuade. Young master, those people are so pitiful, they don't look like people with bad intentions. I heard Buddhists say that saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. It is just 100 swamp wolves. Uncle Ian and I aren't afraid of them. If we don't want trouble, our carriage is faster and we can shake them off. Zhong Shou laughed coldly, his expression not changing at all. He only flicked his finger at Chu Shui's brow as a punishment. He wasn't moved by the woman's beauty, like he didn't see her as he continued to look forward. Those few cavalry seemed to know that they had no chance of survival, all of them cursing out. They were pounced on by the wolf pack one after another, following which cries spread out. However, just as the carriage was about to pass by the wolf pack, the woman suddenly stopped. The beautiful woman suddenly whipped the horses, but the cloud-stepping foal under her feet also increased its speed. At the last moment, she dashed to the side of the carriage. She jumped up and dangerously hung on the right side of the carriage. Chu Shui hurriedly stepped forward and tried to pull her back. Zhong Shou sneered coldly and pulled out a sword from his side. With a swing of his hand, he threw the sword in that direction. A cold glint flashed in Yin Yang's eyes as the saber in his hand suddenly left its scabbard. It brought with it a huge red flame as it swept towards the right shaft of the carriage. The pretty woman was slightly startled, and her eyes were filled with despair. In the next moment, there was a light Kong sound. A jade-like hand as white as porcelain suddenly reached out and easily deflected Zhong Shou's sword to the side. The figure hanging from the shaft of the carriage also seemed to float up weightlessly. Like a feather, it danced with the wind, perfectly dodging the blade. The woman chuckled, but just as she was about to land on the ground, her expression suddenly changed, only to see a black glow get close to him without a sound or presence. When she noticed, it was already 10 feet in front of her. It was as quick as a shooting star, arriving in a flash. Her brows furrowed, and her body unbelievably turned in the air, like she didn't need to borrow strength to float to the left. Her body was also unbelievably quick. In a flash, she was a full 300 feet away. However, that speck of black light also changed direction in midair. A slight wind wrapped around it, and the speed of the saber increased, instantly several times faster than before. Its aura was indiscernible, like a ball of black mist, such that one couldn't see where the saber glow was pointing at. Flying saber, changing direction? Oh, this is actually sword intent. The pretty woman cried out in surprise, and she was no longer as carefree as before. She hurriedly landed on the ground and dodged to the side, but the black glow still caught up. A blood glow instantly flashed. When his figure stopped, the left side of his chest was already dyed a blood-red color. However, at this moment, his aura reached its peak. The cold energy around her was really suppressive. The grass and mud beneath her feet were all frozen, spreading 1,000 feet out. An incomparably tyrannical spiritual pressure also enveloped this open space. The originally aggressive wolf pack held their breaths. Under the sudden explosion of the woman's aura, their bodies trembled, and their eyes were filled with fear. The 18 cloud-stepping foals in front of the carriage for some reason were even worse than the wolf pack. They also stopped and didn't move. No matter how Yin Yang whipped them, they didn't even take half a step forward. Chu Shui was stunned as she looked at this scene, only feeling that she couldn't wrap her head around it, just as she wanted to help that woman. However, before she could react, the pitiful and weak woman in her eyes had become an expert who could easily deal with Yin Yang's full-strength saber. Yin Yang had already given up, tossing aside the horse whip in his hand. His face was really ugly. Spirit and martial arts dual cultivator, Xiantian master. To be able to easily dodge a saber, she had at least entered the Xiantian realm. Zhongshu slightly nodded his head. Although the cloud-stepping foal didn't have much combat strength, it could walk in the air and could be considered a grade 2 monster beast. It shouldn't be like those swamp wolves, fearing the aura of a Xiantian master. At this moment, she didn't move. It was obvious that a mental secret technique was used to control her mind. In his heart, he felt that it was a pity that this saber wasn't able to take this woman's life. He also knew that this woman's strength was deep and immeasurable, which was why he didn't choose her neck or brow. Instead, he aimed for her chest. He was worried that this woman was too strong and would miss. Interesting. Where did you learn this flying dagger technique from? To actually be able to injure me. And this sword intent is actually similar to the cloud shocking god destroying sword intent of the Lingyun sect. The beautiful woman lowered her head to check her injuries before pulling out the black flying knife. She played with it in her hands, her eyes filled with surprise. I just bought it in Xiaoyuan City. But only this kind of material can withstand this kind of sword intent and not collapse. Apart from that, you also made some medicine. You specially prepared for me, right? Which means that at that time, you already noticed me. Zhongshu's expression didn't change, and he didn't reply. Within the beast oil, there were indeed some medicine mixed within. Every day, using the beast oil to rub on it. During the process of forging the knife, the medicine seeped into the knife body. Unfortunately, Xiaoyuan City was just a mining city, and the amount of medicine one could buy was really little. There weren't many that could be of use to Xiantian experts. When the beautiful woman saw the situation, the smile on her face became even more obvious. She raised her head and looked right at Zhongshu. As expected, finding you to be my cauldron energy seed was the right choice. Hearing those words, Zhongshu and Yin Yang, who were originally focused, their pupils constricted. Cauldron energy seed? That tone, did this woman not come from Gantia Mountain or one of their enemies? If one observed carefully, this woman's entire body seemed to be filled with a natural, casual, and unrestrained bearing. And when she spoke with assurance, she was extremely relaxed and composed. Although her appearance was beautiful, there was also a charm that could enchant people, contained between her brows. She was obviously poisoned, but it was like she was bitten by a mosquito, not caring at all. You are Zhongshu from Gantia Mountain? I heard those people say that you are the heir of the Monster King. The day before yesterday, I saw something interesting. With the body of a martial warrior, you killed a spirit-observing realm spirit master. How amazing! Meeting you today is even more surprising. Not only are you scheming, but your flying knife technique and your sword intent are also shocking. I originally didn't plan to let you know and was prepared to follow you. However, since my plans have failed, I will ask you directly. Then let me ask you directly. Are you willing to be my cauldron origin embryo? Chapter 49. When the pretty girl spoke, she was not only in high spirits. The way she looked at Zhongshu was also unusually passionate. It was like Zhongshu was already hers. If you agree, I might not be able to help you get the position of Gantia Mountain Monster King. However, before you become a 6 Meridian martial ancestor, I will kill whoever dares to kill you. Yin Yang was even more wary, taking a deep breath. Cauldron energy seed? May I ask if you are from the Xianshui demon sect or the Yuan demon temple? Or are you from the Tan Mountain nightmare? It is the Tan Mountain 7 spirit sect, the beautiful demon sect that you all speak of. The girl proudly raised her chin, viciously staring at Yin Yang, like she was unhappy with the word demon that came out of his mouth. I don't change my name or surname. 7 Spirit Sect's top disciple Zhao Yanran is under orders from my master to search for the seed. Yin Yang smiled bitterly, but his eyes were cold, without any warmth. So, Miss Yanran is preparing to practice your sect's mysterious demon embryo nurturing method in order to break through to the sky realm in one fell swoop? However, I heard that your sect's technique usually results in either death or injury. Even if the person with the seed survives, their cultivation will be destroyed. There are no exceptions. Naturally, the ancestors' legacy records have long ago. The life and death ratio between the person who planted the seed and the cauldron energy seed is 70-30. However, until now, only one cauldron was able to survive. There are many similar techniques in the world. Which sect isn't like that? However, what other choice do you have now? As she said that, Zhao Yanran glanced at Zhong Shou. If you accept my seed, your dual meridian body can be suppressed before the ancestor realm. Be it martial techniques or spiritual techniques, they can all improve by leaps and bounds. If you aren't willing, I will kill you now. My seed was personally refined from 12 illusionary flame lotus seeds that my master obtained from 30,000 feet underground. It naturally contains pure, illusionary flame, vengeful power. Once it is planted, it can open up 7 meridians within half a year. The choice is entirely up to you. Chu Shui furrowed her brows and felt a chill run down her spine. Zhao Yanran didn't seem to have any pity for other people's lives. She treated it as a normal thing. When it came to killing people, his tone was terrifyingly calm. Thinking back to the few warriors who died in the wolf pack, it was actually just a show. She couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. She unconsciously took a step closer to Zhong Shou. She wasn't afraid of killing people, but she was a little afraid of this woman. He was, after all, a figure from the Devil's sect. Whether it was his temperament or his methods, they were both frighteningly strange, just as he felt that the chill was about to seep into his bones. Zhong Shou patted her shoulder, and Chu Shui immediately felt her body warm up. Only then did she realize that she had been unknowingly captured by this woman's spirit. Then, he saw the young man beside him say with an indifferent expression, "Choose me as your cauldron?" Has Miss Yanran really thought it through? Aren't you afraid that in the future, your many years of hard work will be taken away by me? When Zhao Yanran heard that, she scoffed coldly. Be it the martial path or the cultivation of the spirit technique, they all focus on not being afraid. I get 70%, and you get 30%. It's just life or death. How could there be so much fear and trepidation? It would be best if you win, but it doesn't matter if you lose. Zhong Shou, you're the most talented person I have seen in these 16 years. Unfortunately, due to the restrictions of your bloodline, you won't be able to achieve anything in your life. If I can't even win against a piece of trash like you, then I deserve it. Anyways, the more outstanding you are, the happier I, Zhao Yanran, will be. The more outstanding you are, the happier you will be. Kiki, an energy core refined from the illusionary flame lotus. To speak the truth, I'm a little tempted. Zhong Shou smiled. In the next moment, his face turned cold. If you are done, then scram. To say that he was tempted wasn't a lie. The illusionary flame lotus was indeed a good thing. Charging into the mythic master realm was a huge temptation. Even without the help of others, he had a 99% confidence that he would be able to devour the owner of the seed. However, the moment he used the mysterious demon seed raising technique and the illusionary flame lotus, it would be the same as sealing his future path. Based on what he knew, the seed was more or less in conflict with his energy swallowing technique. More importantly, he was annoyed by the craziness of this girl. That slightly arrogant attitude, that arrogant tone, that attitude of everything being under her control, all made him really annoyed. Chu Shui felt fortunate, her hand pressing on her sword as she stared warily at Zhao Yanran. The sword claw on her left hand also opened up slightly. Zhao Yanran was startled, looking at Zhong Shou in disbelief. She didn't expect that her suggestion would be rejected. Hesitating for a moment, Zhao Yanran didn't directly kill him. Her brows furrowed. Why did you reject? Zhong Shou, with how vicious you were when you killed that spirit master, you shouldn't have rejected. But my conditions aren't enough? Or are you just a coward? No. If that's the case, then all the more you should agree. Zhong Shou laughed coldly and didn't speak. He was too lazy to explain. Anyways, a battle was unavoidable today. His gaze was deep as he looked at this girl's injuries. The poison that he made wasn't strong, but it was penetrating. However, it was extremely permeable. Once infected, it would be like gangrene attached to the bone, extremely difficult to expel. Even for a Xiantian martial master, this 15 minutes should be enough for them to take effect. Even if only Yin Yang, a grade 8 mythic master, had the ability to go up against Zhao Yinran, they still had a chance of winning today's battle. Their chances of winning were about 90-1. Zhao Yinran 90%, while the three of them only had one. Zhao Yinran muttered to herself for a moment, her expression slowly calming down. Not only didn't she attack, but she smiled. Are you willing or not? Let's talk after you hear me play a song. He actually took out a few bamboo flutes of different shapes and materials from his waist. Then, like she was having a tough time choosing, her expression was really serious as her eyes scanned a few flutes. Which one should I choose? Zhong Shou's brows furrowed. Just one look, and he knew that this person was an expert in music. The same Xiao song could produce a different flavor if played with a different Xiao. The iron flute was thick, the bamboo flute was ethereal, the jade flute was crisp. Each had their own specialties. Based on what he knew, this so-called Tan Mountain Seven Spirit sect had passed down several music techniques since ancient times, using music to hurt people. With just a slight thought, he guessed what this girl was planning. Zhong Shou looked down and directly smiled. Miss Yanran, if you can't find a suitable flute, you can't find a suitable one. I do have one here. I guarantee that you will be satisfied. Chu Shui was startled, thinking to herself, when did they bring such things with them? She and Yin Yang were focused on improving their martial arts. As for the young master himself, he had never touched one before. A moment later, she finally came back to her senses and realized something. Her face instantly flushed red as she spat out, scolding Zhong Shou in her heart for being so despicable. Zhao Yinran didn't notice at all, using just a moment to pick up one of the jade flutes. Her expression was really serious as she placed the mouthpiece by her lips. When the flute started, it was cold and ethereal, but it was also like a broken thread, weak and endless. Yin Yang and Chu Shui were both wary. However, after listening for a moment, they couldn't help but fall into a trance. Gradually, her voice sounded like sobbing, causing one to subconsciously feel sorrowful. Zhong Shou was the weakest out of the three of them, but he was smiling casually. In his sleeves, a black cloud pattern flying knife appeared and disappeared. He thought that he wouldn't be tempted by this flute sound. However, a moment later, the memories in his mind suddenly flooded over. He was totally caught off guard as his mind was immersed within. P.S. It isn't easy to consecutively update 3 chapters. Please help me recommend it. Thank you. The results of Wasteland Reclamation all depended on the support of the readers. Chapter 50. Where is this? Deep within a mountain range, on a stone platform hanging at the side of the mountain peak, Zhong Shou looked around. His thoughts were filled with shock. In the next moment, his eyes were attracted by a person who was looking at the morning glow in the distance. He was dressed in a cloth shirt, white and clean. His back wasn't very broad, but his aura was really majestic. His aura was indiscernible. However, for some reason, when Zhong Shou looked over, he felt that this person was really sad. Shou, do you miss your mother? Of course. But father, didn't you say that mother isn't in the cloud world and can't come back? She isn't in the cloud world, but it isn't like she can't come back. That person laughed bitterly, but didn't turn around. In the past, I thought that your mother was already dead, but recently I kept thinking about her. Maybe I should try my best to bring her back. My show, it can't always be without mother. Really? Father? You didn't lie to me? Where is mother? Showa wants to go see mother now. Zhong Shou felt more and more confused. He didn't want to speak, but he couldn't help but speak. Moreover, it was really young, like the voice of a 6-year-old kid. especially when the two words mother came out of his mouth. There was actually a bit of fervent anticipation in his chest. He frowned and thought about it for a moment before coming back to his senses. This should be a fragment of Zhongsho's 13 years of memories. The person in front laughed out loud as he turned his head around. His handsome face was filled with heroism, and his gaze was really sharp. You can follow me to see your mother, but you can't be weak. 20 years. We only need 20 years, and we will go and see how strong the Liu family, who dominates the 800 small worlds, is. Zhongsho's eyes constricted. Wasn't this person the blood maniac monster saint that he was familiar with, the nine-tailed sky fox? Before he was able to think about it, the scenes in front of his eyes started to collapse. Zhongsho's consciousness flowed along the memory river. It didn't take long for him to arrive at yet another memory. This time, it was a spacious drill ground. Beside it were many stone locks and a large number of sabers, spears, swords, and halberds. His chest and abdomen were breathing heavily. His body also seemed to be enduring intense training, and he was extremely exhausted. However, there was a stifling feeling in his chest. Boundless unwillingness filled his heart. He hated the unfairness of the world and hated his own body for being so useless. It was still that middle-aged man. However, at this moment, there was no sharpness in his eyes. Instead, they were filled with heartache and guilt. All right, show you haven't opened your chakra meridians because you have the human and demon dual meridians. It's not your fault that you can't practice martial arts. No matter how much he tortured himself, it was useless. Even if he couldn't walk the path of martial cultivation, he could still cultivate soul power, right? In a few days, I will send you to Linhai College. His memory was shattered again. When Zhongsho's eyes were filled with countless fragments of images, he gradually pieced together a scene. This time, he was in a narrow corridor. As Zhongsho walked inside, he could hear countless voices coming from both sides. Is this person that trash from Class B? Using 3 years and still unable to open up his soul ocean? It's him. I heard that this person is the prince of Gantian Mountain, the future monster king. Tisk. The demon race had always respected the strong. How would those Gantian Mountain people listen to him? Wouldn't he be dead for sure? What a joke. Since he has no talent, he should leave on his own. He took up a spot in a spiritual land for nothing. Different from before, at this moment, within Zhongsho's chest, that unwillingness was getting stronger and stronger. Rage and hatred surged. Apart from all this, there were also threads of despair that filled the bottom of his heart. Following which, not only Zhongsho's 13 years of memories, but even the unfairness and hardships he faced in his last life were all dug out. The sadness of losing his father when he was young. At a young age, he took care of his sick mother alone. Apart from working, he relied on his hard work to get into the highest school in the Dongling Cloud World. However, his spot was snatched away by others, and, in the end, he wasn't even able to complete his studies. His mother passed away, and he was all alone. After which, he worked hard and slowly revealed his talents in the business world. However, he was ostracized by others. He could only fall to working in the library to make ends meet. Zhongsho giggled as he looked on, like it had nothing to do with him. Then, he waved his hand, and the illusions in front of him dissipated. When he opened his eyes once more, he heard the sound of the flute continue, still reverberating around. As for Zhao Yinran herself, she seemed to be totally immersed in it, her expression extremely focused. Zhongsho laughed involuntarily, lazily leaning his back. He actually reclined comfortably under the roof of the carriage. Then, when the rhythm of the flute changed once more, he used the pine-pattern wind sword in his hand, along with the sword sheath, to lightly knock it beside him. The sound wasn't loud, but the sound of metal and wood clashing caused the flute to suddenly freeze. The melancholy intent realm also instantly disappeared. Zhao Yinran couldn't help but look over with a weird expression. She looked at Zhongsho, who was still awake and smiling. Instinctively, she felt a wave of shock. Frowning, Zhao Yinran was about to change the tune. Waves of mental energy spread towards the direction of the carriage. However, Zhongsho took the sword and knocked once more. This time, it was really sudden, but it was also just right. It actually messed up her flute music. What little meaning it had left was also gone. Yin Yang and Chu Shui, who were immersed in their memories, slowly came back to their senses at this moment. Looking at the situation in front of them, they didn't understand. However, in just a short moment, they were all covered in cold sweat, their eyes filled with fear. Zhao Yanran's eyes were filled with a cold sharpness. Once could be said to be a coincidence, but twice in a row, it definitely couldn't be explained as an accident. The person in front of her actually had a way to break her Yellow Spring Hades song. Before she could think about how to deal with it, the third knock sounded out. This third time, not only did she feel that her flute music was messed up, but even the internal energy in her body seemed to be unstable. There was also an energy that was stuck in her chest that couldn't be vented. Zhao Yanran's eyes flashed. She paused for a moment, but still continued to blow out the following notes. Following which, she saw Zhongsho's lips curl up devilishly. It was the fourth time that he used the sword to knock on the wooden board. It made it hard for her to continue playing the flute music. The bloodstain on the left side of his chest had expanded by a full circle at this moment. Her face, which was like a peach blossom, seemed to have turned ashen white. However, when the coldness in her eyes retreated, she didn't show any annoyance. Instead, that crazed intent was extremely intense. The teen in front of her, who wasn't even of age, could actually give her such a surprise. Zhongsho, are you really only 13? Have you learned music before? My Yellow Spring Hades song is something that even my few junior sisters can't do anything about. To be able to break free from my song is already extraordinary. To be able to break this song of mine, it is even more impossible for an ordinary cultivator to do so. How can I give up on such an unpolished gem like you? How about this, if you agree? Apart from the 12 illusionary flame lotus seeds, I can also give you 3 foundation training pills. If you don't agree, I have no way to force you. Zhongsho sighed, bitterly rubbing the center of his brows. It seems like this crazy woman really had her eyes on him and wasn't going to let him go, just as he was trying his best to think of a way to get rid of this woman. Suddenly, he felt a giant shadow cover him. When he raised his head to look at the sky, he saw a dragon's silhouette wriggling over from 3,000 feet in the sky. Zhongsho couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He had waited for a full 10 days. This person had finally arrived. Chapter 51. That Long Ing arrived in the blink of an eye. In just a moment, he was above the carriage. It was roughly 600 feet long. Looking closely, it wasn't a true dragon, but a giant flood dragon. It had a white horn on its head and 4 claws on its stomach. Its flesh and bones weren't fully formed, lying softly under its stomach. It didn't have dragon scales or whiskers. Its body surface was really smooth. However, its form was really majestic and strong. There was also a purple figure standing on top of the broad head of the flood dragon. On his back was a peachwood sword, his clothes dancing in the wind. His face was white and clean, but his expression was really cold. Looking down, he patted the horn. Then, the giant flood dragon head descended. It caused the 18 cloud stepping foals and hundreds of swamp wolves to feel even worse. Their bodies all shuddered, their eyes filled with fear. At this moment, be it Yin Yang or Chu Shui, their expressions were really serious. Zhongsho scoffed coldly. TSK, this fellow, so at this time he already likes to act cool and act cool. His voice was really low and no one could hear it. Su Chu Shui, who was inches away from him, heard every word. She turned around and asked curiously, "Young master, you know this person? And what does acting cool and act cool mean?" Zhongsho instantly gave out an awkward smile, thinking about how this era didn't have such words. However, he did know the person in front of him, one of the virtual historical characters in the God Emperor game. However, the developer of this game seemed to have a really bad taste. As expected, it was as advertised, trying to make it real. Even this person's personality and hobbies were exactly the same. That person floated down from the head of the flood dragon. When he saw Zhao Yanran, he was startled. After giving a friendly smile, his eyes were filled with wariness. So, it is Miss Yin Ran from Seven Spirit Sect. What a coincidence. I am the first seat of the Lingyun Sect Hall of Heroes, Long Ruo. Greetings. Is this the Prince of Gantian Mountain Zong Shou? Do you have time to have a chat with me? The last sentence was directed at the three people on the carriage. At the center of this person's brows, several threads of blue light shone towards Zong Shou. Although Zong Shou's words were filled with disdain towards this person. However, when he spoke to this person, his back was straight and solemn, not showing any laziness at all. He wasn't trying to suck up to this person, but respect towards a huge enemy. Of course I have the time, and it's exactly what I'm looking for. Smiling as he glanced at Zhao Yanran, Zong Shou stood up. He stepped down from the carriage. Mr. Long Ruo, is it because of the Pill's Spirit Mountain 10 days ago? That's right. Longs of Zonzufs of Zong's hand. Of the of eyes of the prince. Of eyes. Of eyes, Zong Shou. Closing his eyes to check, he was first surprised, but then he was filled with disappointment. When he released his hand, Long Ruo sighed, saying sincerely, I don't want to hide from the prince. I am here on orders to apologize for the Pill Spirit Mountain matter a few days ago. The first seat of the Hero Gathering Hall, Liang Niaozi, was hoodwinked and took bribes. He has been punished and locked in the Wanfeng Tower for 24 years. The first seat of the Pill Spirit Mountain, Ling Weizi, didn't investigate and went into seclusion to cultivate. I am ashamed to say that your father helped my Lingyun Mountain in the past. Now that such a thing has happened, it makes the 30,000 disciples of my sect feel ashamed. The sect is unfortunate to have such an unfilial disciple. Please forgive me. While Long Ruo said that, he bowed deeply toward the three of them. Zong Shou quickly turned around to show that he didn't dare to accept such a bow. No matter how unhappy he was with the Lingyun sect, he could only smile magnanimously. He thought to himself that this person was really like the character in the game, polite, not too warm, just like a righteous gentleman. However, the way he did things had a magnanimity that other people couldn't compare to, following which Long Ruo's tone changed. Originally, Long Ruo had something to ask you. I wanted to ask if you were willing to join my Lingyun sect. My sect leader asked me to do so. If you agree, you can directly become a direct disciple of my sect and join the sect leader's faction. Zhao Yanran's brows instantly furrowed. She found it weird that Long Ruo, who was the head of the Hero Gathering Hall, would pay so much attention to Zong Shou. His words were also really humble, like he was really guilty. At this moment, when she heard what Long Ruo said, she was even more curious. Direct disciple of the Lingyun sect. Not only did it mean that Zong Shou could enter and exit the Lingyun sect as he wished, he could also read all the secret manuals. Every month, he would have large amounts of resources, and he would have the ability to fight for the position of sect leader. He spent so much just to recruit Zong Shou. One couldn't help but pay attention to what the two of them were talking about at Pill Spirit Mountain 10 days ago. On the other hand, Yin Yang and Chu Shui's faces were filled with surprise. They could only hope that their prince would immediately nod his head. Zong Shou shook his head slightly. Since you said it was originally, then that means that Mr. Long Ruo has changed his mind? Long Ruo sighed, his face filled with regret. That's right. Originally, Long Ruo wanted to tie you up and bring you back to my sect, even if you didn't agree. 343 breaths to break my sect's small heaven sword formation, and in a short 4 hours to copy our 12 god talismans. With such talent and comprehension in both martial arts and talismans, not to mention being a direct disciple, even the next sect master of our sect could do it. However, when Long Ruo was checking his meridians, he noticed that the prince's body wasn't as simple as having a dual meridian body. Even if my sect went all out to get a dual meridian cultivation method for the prince, it would be useless. The crown prince's spiritual cultivation could go further, but his chi cultivation technique could only reach the mythic master level. However, even if you can't become a direct disciple, you can still become an inner sect disciple. My sect can also go all out to help you search for a good method. Zhao Yinran's pupils constricted, and she couldn't say anything. 343 breaths to break this small heaven sword formation. For hours to copy out 12 god talismans. Was he referring to the sky sword platform and the heaven talisman platform? Was this Long Ruo joking? Zhong Shaoxin's heart sank slightly. He really didn't expect that apart from having dual meridians, he actually had other problems. However, his mood only darkened for a moment before it returned back to normal. He originally didn't like Ling Yun's sect and didn't think about joining their sect. When he heard the last few sentences, he laughed coldly and was too lazy to bother. With his temperament, how could he be willing to eat food that was given to him by others? So what if he couldn't cultivate? Zhong Shou didn't need anyone to give him anything. Long Ruo's words seemed gentle, but that coldness and distance couldn't be hidden. Not bothering about the anxiousness of Chu Shui behind him, Zhong Shou directly shook his head. Thank you for your kindness. Since I am sure that I can't cultivate, then I have given up on this thought. My life goal is to travel around and see the 5 continents and 12 islands of the cloud world, the majestic mountains and rivers. I won't trouble your sect anymore. Long Ruo wasn't surprised, nodding his head. That's good too. However, my sect has to compensate for that day's matter. In the past, the ancestor had set a rule that no matter who it was, as long as they could break the sword formation and draw the god talisman, they could choose 3 items from the Xian treasure trove. That treasure trove was too big, and I didn't bring it. However, this time I specially brought some things that the prince might be able to use. While speaking, Long Ruo waved his hand, and hundreds of different items appeared beside him. Some were pills, some were weapons, and some were secret manuals. They appeared in the air and hung in front of him. Zhong Shou felt weird. He really didn't know that Ling Yun's sect had such a rule. In his last life, he had completed the Sky Sword platform and Heaven Talisman platform numerous times. However, other than the identity of a direct disciple of the Cloud Soaring sect, none of the characters that he had created had ever received any physical rewards. Chapter 52. He didn't understand, but Zhong Shou still smiled expressionlessly. He didn't want to take it, but when he saw the weird look in Long Ruo's eyes, his heart sunk. Taking in a deep breath, he walked over and casually took out 2 medicine bottles and a jade pendant. Ling Yun's sect's heaven, earth, Xian, and yellow treasuries collected all the treasures in the world. The heaven word was the most expensive, earth second, and Xian third. However, all of the treasures within were difficult to value. At this moment, what Long Ruo took out were all rare and precious items. He didn't know if Ling Yun's sect was compensating him or if it was a real matter. Anyways, if he didn't take it, Ling Yun's sect wouldn't be at ease. At this time, he decided not to be courteous with these fellows. He would treat it as compensation for Zhong Weiran's Ling Yun vermilion token. Zhao Yinran had already calmed down from her shock. When she saw the situation, she couldn't help but frown. The item that Zhong Shou chose just now was really normal and wasn't the most precious item out of all of them. On the face of Long Ruo, it was like he was praising Zhong Shou for knowing his place. An appreciative smile appeared on his face. A bottle of blood cloud marrow can strengthen the skin and grow the flesh and blood. Just 1 drop was equivalent to a year's worth of skin refining for an ordinary person. 10 heaven plane pills can strengthen Xiantian energy. Did the prince prepare it for your servant? There's also this dragon spirit jade wall. It can calm the heart, strengthen vital energy, and stabilize the foundation. The little girl beside you is also a double cultivator. Unfortunately, her spirit master talent is a little weak. Her energy ocean and soul ocean can't be merged. This item is suitable and can help her break through to the mythic master realm. The prince really is a thoughtful person. When he said that, Long Ruo took out a token, carefully holding it in the air as he passed it over. The items just now were promised by the ancestor. This item is the true compensation. Top-grade gold token. I believe this item won't embarrass our sect. Please accept it, Your Highness. In the future, no matter what you ask, as long as it doesn't go against the right path, the entire Ling Yun sect will go all out to help the prince. Zhong Shou gave him a sidelong glance. The red command medallion did not have the original golden lines. Instead, there were 3 purple lines carved on one end of the command medallion. This was the highest grade of the cloud-soaring vermilion token that he knew of. This time, he didn't reach out to take it. Instead, he smiled and shook his head. I don't want the token. However, Zhongsho happened to have something to ask of your esteemed sect. Since Mr. Long Ruan knows, I have the intention to fulfill this servant's wish. Naturally, he could also see the situation inside his body. Mister, please lend him a hand and remove the forbidding aura in his body. How does that sound? Yin Yang's expressionless face immediately changed slightly. Zhao Yinran also looked at the man in his 30s in surprise. When Long Rua heard that, he hesitated and revealed a bitter expression. After a long while, he hesitantly explained, Your servant's restrictions were placed by his sect. It was not difficult for Long Rua to solve it. However, if I interfere in his sect matters, it would be a little inappropriate. Before he finished, a cold, mocking intent appeared in Zhongsho's eyes. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and sigh. Forget it. Long Rua can just do it. My Lingyun sect will bear all the consequences. He didn't seem to do anything, but within Yin Yang's body, bits of red spiritual light seeped out from the surface of his skin. His mouth suddenly coughed intensely as he half-knelt on the ground, until 2 golden threads broke out from Yin Yang's chest and abdomen, bringing with it a pool of fresh blood. Blood spurted out, but Yin Yang's face didn't show any signs of exhaustion. Instead, his voice was hoarse as he roared out like a wild beast. Like a beast that had been trapped for a long time, suddenly breaking out of its cage. Although he was purposely suppressing his roar, he still couldn't suppress it. It was filled with joy and unrestrained intent. In just a few breaths, an energy whirlpool appeared around his body. His energy went out of control and seeped out, cutting all the weeds around. The moment these 2 golden threads were taken out, he actually broke through the last meridian and entered the peak of the 9th meridian of the bodily chakra realm. Long Rua didn't bother, his eyes filled with deep meaning as he looked carefully at Zhongsho. After a short while, he still shook his head. What a waste. The prince is not only talented, but your intelligence is also far greater than normal people. Regretfully, the heavens don't bless you and can't let you succeed. What a pity. Today, unlocking this person's restrictions is just a small matter. That Lingyun vermilion token is still useful. However, 10 days ago, my sect wanted to hide the matter of Pill Spirit Mountain. Please forgive me. Leaving these words, this person didn't say anything more. After keeping those hundreds of treasures, he tossed down the Lingyun vermilion token. His body floated up and returned to the head of the flood dragon. He actually didn't speak a single word to Zhao Yinran. Apart from greeting her when he first arrived, he treated her like air and didn't exist. His words didn't hide anything from her, like he wasn't worried that Zhao Yinran would spread it around. Naturally, he didn't have any intentions of helping Zhongsho out of this situation. On the side of Zhao Yinran, from start to finish, her eyes were as cold as knives as she stared right at Long Rua. When the latter rode the flood dragon and left, her killing intent rose to the peak, and she didn't bother to hide it at all. Zhongsho felt slightly regretful when he saw that. Although Seven Spirit Sect and Lingyun Sect were huge sects that were enemies with one another. However, looking at the situation today, it wasn't a situation where the 2 sects would fight to the death. They were just afraid of one another and wouldn't interact with one another. He mocked himself. Lingyun Sect gave him these items as orders from their ancestor, but it was to seal his mouth. It wasn't for the Sword Formation Heaven Talisman, but for Lingyun Sect, a betrayal that wasn't worth mentioning. Thinking about it carefully, this giant thing was really terrifying. However, he still profited this time. A bottle of blood cloud marrow, 10 simple heaven pills. In just a month, he could create a Xiantian master. As for that dragon spirit jade wall, it was even harder to obtain. Naturally, there was also this top-grade Lingyun vermilion token. Before this, he didn't seem to care about this item, but now after Long Rual left, he giggled and held the red token in his hand. He felt at ease, thinking that even if he had no use for this item, he wasn't willing to ask Ling Yun's sect for help. However, in the future, it would be good to sell it for money. There were only 3 top-grade Ling Yun vermilion tokens in the world. Chu Shua, who was beside him, looked at the giant flood dragon charging into the clouds with a longing expression. That Mr. Long Ruo is also a dual cultivator? To be able to ride a flood dragon, who knows how high his cultivation is. He looks even stronger than the ruler. Who knows if he has reached the Ascended Realm and Day Wandering Realm? How can he be considered a dual cultivator? He only learned some body cultivation techniques. However, his soul power is barely at the Day Wandering Realm. As the 3rd generation first seed of Ling Yun, such ability isn't anything to brag about. Zhao Yinran laughed coldly. In the next moment, she shuddered. She looked towards Yin Yang, only to see that the aura of this 30-year-old man was like that of a wild beast, maniacal and violent. His eyes were filled with killing intent and were incomparably fierce. It was like as long as she showed any animosity towards Zhong Shou, he would pounce on her. Zhao Yinran's eyes squinted, scoffing lightly. Her gaze returned back to Zhong Shou, a weird glow flashing in her eyes. Ling Yun's sect's ancestor wanted a top talent to inherit his techniques, which was why he set up the Sky Sword and Heaven Talisman platforms in many dojos. The 12 Heaven Talisman God Tablets and the small Heaven Sword formation are famous in the Central Cloud Continent. Who knew that you would break it today? 343 breaths to break the formation, 4 hours to draw talismans. Is that true? Zhong Shou smiled and didn't comment. Although Long Ruo left, he didn't need to worry about not being able to deal with this demon girl. He was originally planning to use Long Ruo's strength to break away from this woman. It seemed like Ling Yun's sect wouldn't be willing to see him become Zhao Yinran's cauldron. However, the current situation wasn't bad. The unknown problem in his body should be enough for this demon girl to give up. Following which, Zhao Yinran suddenly pulled out her sword and pointed over, her face filled with passion. Pull out your sword. If you can block my 100 swords without using Xiantian energy, then I won't mention the Cauldron Energy Seed discussion anymore. I will also give you 3 Foundation Training Pills and 3 Snow Spirit Pills. If you can't, then you will be my servant in the future. P.S. Sanjiang is over. Thank you all for your support and love. There are still 3 weeks to go, so I need all of your help to support me. Please. Chapter 53. Today, if you can block my 100 swords without using Xiantian energy, then I won't mention the Cauldron Energy Seed. I will also give you 3 Foundation Training Pills and 3 Snow Spirit Pills. If you can't, then you will be my servant. Zhong Shou was surprised when he heard that. This time he was really startled. This Zhao Yinran's personality was really unpredictable. He originally thought that this woman wouldn't mention this matter and that they wouldn't have anything to do with each other. He didn't expect that Zhao Yinran's thoughts would jump and suddenly want to have a sword duel with him. Looking at her expression, she seemed to be really serious. She looked like, if he wasn't willing, she wouldn't let it go. Tilting his head, Zhong Shou's pine pattern wind sword was already out of its sheath. Although it was a little problematic, it wasn't bad to end things like this. 3 Foundation Training Pills and 3 Snow Spirit Pills. He was going to gamble on this battle. Actually, he had no choice but to do so. However, before he walked up, Chu Shui pulled him back and said anxiously, "Young master, don't bother about this demon girl. Even if she doesn't use Xiantian True Qi, her True Qi is much stronger than yours. This battle isn't fair at all. To think that this demon girl wants to have a sword duel. At most, we'll go all out with her." Chu Shui isn't afraid of death. The knife in Yin Yang's hand also gave out a few sparks. The surrounding area was filled with water and steam rose up. However, his face was as cold as a 10,000-year Xian soldier. "Prince, Yin Yang is confident that he can stop this woman. You don't have to worry about anything." Zhao Yinran smiled in disdain, too lazy to argue with Chu Shui. Yin Yang was the only one she was slightly concerned about. Who knows if this person was trapped by those 2 golden threads for too long. His foundation was incomparably sturdy. At this moment, after breaking through the 9 meridians of the bodily chakra meridian, he had broken through. His aura wasn't unstable at all. Instead, it quickly stabilized. He was at the peak of the bodily chakra level. There were even signs of a breakthrough. He was like a volcano that had been silent for a long time and was about to erupt. Zhong Shouxin felt a slight warmth in his heart. He gently tapped the back of Chu Shue's wrist with his finger, causing her jade arm to go limp. He easily broke free and stood in front of Zhao Yinran. Similarly, he pointed his sword forward and said with a smile, 100 swords, 3 foundation refining pills, and 3 snow spirit pills. This is what Miss Yinran said. Don't go back on your word. What was weird was that when Zhong Shou raised the sword in his hand, he didn't look as carefree and unruly as before. His entire being was solemn and dignified, like a sword that had just been sharpened, its sharpness flashing. After a short while, it returned to normal, and all of its sharpness was restrained. Zhao Yanran was stunned at first, and then her face was full of praise. Only someone with such talent in the Tao of the sword would be able to break through the 18 sword puppets of the cloud-soaring sect in a short period of time. All of a sudden, she was delighted and her fighting spirit surged. When a light breeze blew across the swamp, Zhao Yinran's celestial-like body suddenly disappeared from her original spot. Her entire body seemed to have merged into the wind, hard to see with the naked eye. Yin Yang's hand that was holding the knife tightly clenched, his muscles subconsciously tensing up. Chu Shui was unable to see the trajectory of Zhao Yinran's body. By the time he reacted, he heard the deafening sound of weapons vibrating in his ears. Zhong Shou was expressionless as he stood in the middle of the field, expressionlessly looking forward. The sword in his hand suddenly stabbed to the left and then slashed to the right. A series of clanging sounds broke out around him as the swords and blades clashed. However, she remained on the spot, calm and unhurried. She counted 9, 10, 14, 15. The sword speed of the two was extremely quick. Sometimes she didn't even have time to count before she directly jumped over. He thought to himself, although this girl's personality is a little weird, she keeps her promise. Not only did she not use Xiantian True Qi, but she also controlled the strength of the sword at the martial master level. How could a martial master with the body chakra level have such a movement technique that was infused with the wind controlling technique? She was cheating. She was using a cheat. Another ding sound rang out, and it was several times louder than the previous dozens of clashes. Samuraim's eyes dimmed, only to feel his right hand slightly numb. The vital energy in his chest roiled, and he could feel that the strength had increased by tens of times. Threads of icy cold energy flowed up the sword, causing the tip of the sword to be covered in frost. Laughing coldly, Zhong Shou didn't hesitate to slap a body flame talisman on his body, only to feel his entire body warm up. He still didn't have any intention of retreating, gathering all his strength at the tip of the sword as he casually stabbed to the side of his body. Another series of sword clashing sounds. After 20-odd strikes, the sound of the sword vibrating got louder and louder each time. The strength of the true qi also increased with each strike. Zhong Shou didn't show any signs of fear, using sword against sword, his body still standing straight. Chu Shui looked on in disbelief. With Zhong Shou's cultivation, how could he compete with Zhao Yanran, who was a Xiantian master? Only when her vision slowly adjusted did she realize that each of Zhong Shou's strikes struck the spine or the tip of Zhao Yanran's sword. The position wasn't fixed, and the force it took was usually the least. She was even more astonished, taking a few steps forward, wanting to see more clearly. Zhao Yanran's body was so quick. How did Zhong Shou do it? How was he able to discern the path of Zhao Yanran's sword? How was he able to make a prediction so early? He was able to accurately find the best place to take the force. When it reached the 65th sword, the entire region was covered in sword shadows. Numerous cold mists spread all over. Zhong Shou didn't persist. Every time the ice-cold sword attack became too strong, he would retreat. His feet suddenly moved forwards and backwards. Within the heavy sword shadows, he was able to advance and retreat freely. He actually used his ingenious footwork to disturb Zhao Yanran's high-speed body. At the same time, he pointed at Chu Shui. Shui, did you see clearly? You are from the tiger cat race and are born nimble. However, with your speed, if you only use it to dodge and fight, it would be a waste. At this moment, not only Chu Shui, but even Yin Yang understood something, unable to shift his eyes. Zhao Yanran was so furious that her face turned green, scoffing coldly. In that instance, all the illusionary bodies gathered in one spot. A sword pierced out, like it was flying from the heavens, bringing with it a whistling sound as it broke through the air. Zhongshu's expression turned serious. Before they even clashed, he already felt an unstoppable force. He laughed coldly, his body slightly shaking, sometimes left and sometimes right. This caused the tip of the sword to change unpredictably. Just as that intense sword attack was showing signs of weakening, he took several steps back. Taking a few steps back, the pine-patterned wind sword suddenly stabbed out. The sword tips crossed, the two swords instantly forming a series of sword spirals. Zhongshu seemed to be using all his strength to lead this sword attack to the side. Zhao Yanran decided to go with the flow, wanting to force the sword in Zhongshu's hand away. Just as the spirals were about to end and the pine-patterned wind sword was about to fly out of his hand, a look of regret appeared in Zhao Yanran's eyes. Zhongshu's footwork changed once more, his sword suddenly pressing down. Using the strength of the sword spirals, a sword shadow directly swept toward Zhao Yanran's throat. It was so close, so vicious and sharp, so sudden. In that instance, Zhongshu's sword was like a blade from the river of hell. It arrived in an instant, so cold and decisive. Zhao Yanran actually panicked, her body quickly retreating, floating 100 feet away. However, when she landed on the ground, a deep wound appeared on her neck. Looking at Zhongshu, he had already returned to his original spot. The sharpness that he showed before had disappeared once more. He was still as calm as before. Zhao Yanran's hands were slightly trembling, her face filled with disbelief. Even when she heard Long Ruo say that this teen had broken the small heaven sword formation and copied the god talisman, she wasn't as shocked as she was now. What did she see just now? Sword intent. It was actually sword intent. It wasn't like that flying knife, which was just an empty shell. It was really strong, shocking her and making her unable to dodge. It shouldn't have appeared on this teen's body. Such power far exceeded the martial master level. Even she, who was a Xiantian expert, couldn't touch it. However, that sword just now seemed to have both form and soul, but it also seemed like it wasn't. Even if it wasn't far from it. In that instance, Zhao Yanran was first terrified to the extreme, following which, her disbelief and shock also rose to the peak. Who knew that Lingyun Long Ruo would have times when he made a mistake? With a martial master body, he could actually see the profoundness of that sword intent. How could this teen only be limited by the word genius? With such talent, how could he be limited by his body type? If Long Ruo found out in the future, who knows what kind of regret he would have. Chapter 54. Calming herself down, Zhao Yanran recalled once more, confirming that Zhongshu's sword wasn't at the level of sword intent. However, at this moment, when he thought back to his figure, sword skills, footsteps, and even the tiniest of movements, he immediately felt a unique rhythm contained within it. As long as a martial artist was able to peek into the door of martial arts and grasp the essence of martial arts, then every move would have a unique rhythm. Zhongshu's sword technique not only had the rhythm of the sword, but it was also pleasing to the eye. It was like the rhythm of the sword strength, and the sword intent were all there, even reaching the level of the soul. It wasn't truly realized, but it did contain a deep and indiscernible, hard-to-grasp, and extremely strong martial path intent. Taking in a deep breath, Zhao Yanran looked at Zhongshu once more. Before this, she didn't feel it, but looking at him now, She felt that although this half-monster teen looked a little thin and weak, it contained a heroic spirit within, standing out from the masses. His talent was also so outstanding that it was terrifying. A killing intent rose up from the depths of her heart uncontrollably. The aura around Zhao Yinran instantly changed. Numerous ice shards danced in the wind. Within 1,000 feet, snowflakes floated up. The sword in her hand also slowly turned transparent, clear and translucent like a crystal. A bone-chilling killing intent was also locked onto a spot 300 feet away. She definitely couldn't allow such a person to live. Zhongshu's expression changed slightly, raising his eyes and looking coldly at her. He took half a step back, his sword slanting to the left. His aura also changed, a totally different aura from before. Before, he was calm and elegant, but now he was like an unmoving boulder. Under the suppression of this intent, his thin body was as majestic as a mountain. Zhao Yinran's brows furrowed slightly, only feeling that the sword attack that she was accumulating strength for had actually stopped once more. A sentence flashed across her mind. Defend as firm as Source Mountain, attack as swift as a bird. The so-called Origin Mountain was the tallest mountain in the central continent, reaching a height of 340,000 feet. There were 49 peaks, and they were incomparably huge. As for the Blazing Bird, it was the blazing bird of the Western Cloud Sea. When it was born, it was a rank 5 monster beast. It was famous for its speed. When it flew, it was difficult to see with the naked eye. It was not inferior to those mythological beasts. Therefore, it was named the Blazing Bird. That last sword strike during the exchange just now was indeed worthy of the Ardent Bird's agility. Under her frenzied attacks, he had managed to hold on for a total of 65 strikes without even taking half a step back. This could be said to be as solid as Genesis Mountain. However, Zhongshu's defense at that time was far less impressive than it was now. It was a simple movement, but it involved the confrontation of martial arts. Just like when he played the Netherworld song of the Underworld, he had prepared for a long time, but the rhythm was interrupted at the most critical moment. The sword in his hand had yet to be released, but he already had a feeling that it would be difficult for him to continue. Moreover, one in front and one behind, they were two totally different martial path intents. At this moment, she was pretty much certain that Lingyun Long Ruo would regret it in the future. Who knows, he might even beat his chest and stomp his feet for what happened today. She couldn't help but imagine that if the Lingyun sect leader saw this scene, would he directly throw Long Ruo into the Wanwen Pagoda to be suppressed for 8 to 10 years? Looking to the side, she saw that Yin Yang had unknowingly arrived behind Zhongshu, roughly 200 feet away. He was like an open bowstring, filled with animosity. Zhao Yinran's brows furrowed, the killing intent in her eyes slowly retreating. She asked curiously, Zhongshu, do you know about sword intent? Zhongshu's brows furrowed. He felt that this crazy woman in front of him not only didn't have any killing intent, she didn't even have much fighting spirit left. However, he didn't dare to be careless, lightly nodding his head, lying without blinking. I heard of it. There are many records in the ancient books, but I haven't personally seen it in a last life. As one of the 7 emperors of the Cloud World, the Sword Emperor Tanxiu, how could he not have seen sword intent? Even in the real world, he had grasped it long ago. However, with this Zhongshu's 13 years of experience, it was indeed impossible for him to have seen something that belonged to ascended experts. Zhao Yinran only felt that her mouth was a little astringent. She also felt that with Zhongshu's background, he definitely wouldn't have seen such a high level of martial path. However, the complicated feelings in her heart were indescribable, even a little dejected. Without personally witnessing it, without anyone to give him pointers, he was able to grasp the sword intent that she dreamed of. She suddenly retracted her sword and returned it to the sheath. Zhao Yinran was really straightforward, casually tossing the 2 medicine bottles to Zhongshu. Young Master Zhongshu's sword path is already one with the spirit. Along with that flying knife from before, you have already used 3 types of sword intent. I can't win against you. This is the bet of the sword battle. I was too arrogant. Using you as the cauldron energy seed, my life force in the future won't even be 10%. I only hope that we won't meet again in the future." When the medicine bottles were tossed out, a slightly arrogant smile appeared on Zhao Yinran's face. Looking deeply at Zhong Shou, she turned around and left. It was actually gliding on ice. Wherever it passed, the water of the swamp was all frozen. At this moment, her running speed was no slower than Long Rua's giant flood dragon. Zhong Shou was speechless when he saw that, thinking that he had underestimated these ancient people. Who knew that this ice element cultivation method actually had such a use? However, although this Zhao Yanran was only at the Xiantian realm, her true qi was terrifyingly thick. She could actually use it to travel. What a waste. Following which, he smiled as he looked at the medicine bottle in his hand. The aura of an expert from before was totally gone. The 6 pills within were all good stuff. The name of the foundation training pill was really normal. As the name suggested, it was a pill that could help train the foundation and breathing. However, only those large sects and powers could have it. Due to the different recipes, the effects were also different. Gantia Mountain also made it, but the effects were the worst. Based on what Shui said, Zhong Weiran had saved close to 40 of them. In the Sanlu Bank, it was 10 years' worth of Gantian Mountain savings. Unfortunately, it was in a main branch and couldn't be obtained. The foundation training pill of the Seven Spirit sect was a little different. The martial cultivators of the cloud world called it the Seven Spirit Foundation Training Pill. Not only could it be used to build the foundation during internal training, when one opened their meridians and entered the external training level, it also had a miraculous effect. It should be specially prepared by the Seven Spirit sect for Zhao Yanran. As for the Snow Spirit pill, it was a pill that only the Seven Spirit sect had that targeted the soul. Each pill could strengthen one's soul power and purify one's soul ocean. To a certain extent, the value of these 6 pills wasn't any weaker than the 3 treasures that Long Rua had given him. If it wasn't for these things, he wouldn't be an idiot to fight one-on-one with that crazy woman. This Zhao Yinran's martial arts and spiritual cultivation were all extraordinary. She could be said to be a hero amongst men. However, why hadn't he heard of her in his last life? Just as he was distracted, he suddenly felt Chu Shui walk to his side. She said angrily, "This woman has a weird personality. Also, the Lingyun sect is fishing for fame." That Long Rua, since he knew that she was from the beautiful demon sect, why didn't he attack? Zhong Shou smiled, his finger flicking Chu Shui's forehead. "In the future, when you see her, be more polite. Although her methods are vicious, don't randomly call her a demoness. This Seven Spirit sect isn't a true demon sect." Seeing Chu Shui stunned, Zhong Shou felt his head hurt once more. Although the Seven Spirit sect was seen as a demon, it was a little different from the true demon path. Which was why the Lingyun sect didn't see them as a true enemy. This involved the battle during the Desolate Era. Zhong Shou himself wasn't too clear about it, only knowing some rough outlines. P.S. This week, Kai Wang couldn't even find where Qi Dian's recommendation was. He is probably in trouble this time. I hope that everyone can help Kai Wang this week. Don't fall off the new book list in the new week. Apart from that, as for book reviews, Kai Wang writes 6,000 words a day. There are still 2 books published in Taiwan. Also, I am busy dating, so I can only go to the book review section to take a look and have no time to manage it. Let's wait until I enter V and can appoint a deputy head. Chapter 55. It was said that during the Desolate Era, not only did martial arts flourish. In terms of learning, there were many schools of thought. Shizi, who the Seven Spirit sect worshipped as their ancestor, was one of them. He advocated that everyone in the world was equal, no matter if they were strong or weak, no matter where they came from, they all had the same rights. The nobles in the world should all be defeated and let the people make their own decisions. Such a theory was naturally seen as twisted logic by the nobles and experts in the world. They rejected it and placed it on the same level as the demon path. Shizi created the Tsang Shengdao to pass down knowledge. He wanted to create another school apart from Taoism Confucianism, and ink to help the people in the world. In the end, he failed and died. However, a few of his outstanding disciples passed down his ideas, and the Seven Spirit sect was one of them. They were all women, which was why they were called the Beautiful Demon sect. Legend had it that a few thousand years ago, their methods were really extreme. They felt that as long as their ideas were right, they could achieve the goal of everyone being equal, no matter what methods they used. This was why people saw them as demons. Although their way of doing things was better, they were still a little extreme. Just by looking at the few cultivators who followed Zhao Yanran, one could see a thing or two about their style. In the future, people slowly accepted Shizi's ideas. The name of the sect, as the demon path, was naturally overturned, but people still hated them. However, how should he explain all this to Chu Shui? Frowning and thinking about it, Zhong Shou decided to be more direct. I heard that Lingyun's sect has 23 ascended and above martial cultivators and 17-day wandering spirit masters. On the side of the Seven Spirit sect, they only have 3 experts of the same grade. They are both large sects of the world. Do you think that Lingyun Long Ruo would easily attack Zhao Yanran? He added a sentence in his heart. Unless that Long Ruo was sure that he could cultivate, why would he easily help him? Facing such a large sect like the Seven Spirit sect, if Zhao Yanran's attitude was firm, then even that Zhu token might not be reliable. So they bully the weak and fear the strong. Chu Shui immediately came to a realization. No matter how slow-witted she was, she knew that if the 2 great sects were to fight, the 2 great sects would definitely be in trouble. The entire east of the cloud world was going to be in chaos, and people were going to die. At the same time, he was secretly afraid that his words had really angered that crazy woman. Wouldn't he be able to wipe out Gantian Mountain with just one breath? However, putting aside the Lingyun sect, why had he never heard of the Seven Spirit sect? Could it be the legendary hidden sect? He didn't suspect how Zhong Shou knew all this. With Zhong Shou's status as the crown prince, it was not strange for him to know more about these big sections. So what if they were a great sect? Since they had already come knocking on their door, could it be that they were not allowed to fight back? If worst came to worst, he would just risk his life. Although this woman's temper is a little strange, she still keeps her word. Oh, right. What did she mean when she said that the crown prince's swordsmanship was one with the spirit? When I saw a young master use the sword just now, I felt that young master was really very, very brilliant. Even such a sharp sword could be evenly matched. However, as for how brilliant, I don't know. Zhong Shou burst out laughing. He wasn't sure about that. In the battle, just now, he had already exceeded his usual performance. Under the suppression of that crazy woman, with his weak body, he was able to use sword techniques that far exceeded his own strength. However, in terms of the sword path, it wasn't just that. At this moment, he saw Yin Yang walk over, his face cold and solemn, his expression extremely solemn. Yin Yang has something that I would like to ask the Crown Prince. Just now, Long Ruo obviously had more precious spiritual herbs in his hands, so why didn't the Crown Prince choose them? Why did you waste a top-grade Lingyun vermilion token for me? How did you know that Yin Yang was trapped by the restrictions of the sect? Zhong Shou was stunned, thinking about it for a moment, his eyes looking seriously at Yin Yang. No matter how precious those things are, they are useless to me. Why not help you all out? In the future, the safety of Zhong Shou will depend on you and Chu Shui. As for the peerless Lingyun vermilion token, if I were to say that I would rather die than beg the Lingyun sect for anything, I wonder if Uncle Ian would believe me. As for the restrictions on your body, I heard that you came from a famous sect. It seems like a disciple of a sect that my father thinks so highly of shouldn't only have such little strength. There should be another reason, which is why I have some guesses. In the cloud world, there weren't many sects that could be called famous. Even the weakest sect disciple's strength wasn't something normal people could compare to. 30 years old to become a 7 Meridian Mythic Master, his talents couldn't be considered high. Actually, when he first opened his energy ocean, he already felt that Yin Yang's aura was a little dim. Only in these few days, when he opened his bone chakra and entered the martial master realm, was he able to confirm it. Yin Yang's eyes flashed for a moment, following which he sighed and knelt down. Yin Yang has received the kindness of the Crown Prince and the Crown Prince for 2 generations, and I am unable to repay you. Only in this body can I die for the Crown Prince. The last few words were spoken word by word, filled with power. At the center of his brows, a weird diagram made up of blood patterns appeared. Uncle Yin, you are a descendant of the spirit race? Zhong Shou's expression changed, following which he frowned. Once this blood pact is made, it can't be broken for life. Uncle Yin, are you serious? That Ling Yunlong Ruo has already determined that Zhong Shou won't be able to break through the bodily chakra. In the future, not only will it not be of help to you, but it will also drag you down. Yin Yang kept silent, more blood patterns appearing at the center of his brows, causing the diagram to become more complete. Zhong Shou couldn't help but laugh bitterly. He knew the rules of the spirit race, and if he rejected now, it would be the same as insulting Yin Yang. He took in a deep breath. His expression slowly became solemn as he stood in front of Yin Yang. I don't know why Uncle Yin wants to make such an oath, but if one day you feel that it isn't right, you can find me to cancel it. He reached out his hand and tapped the center of Yin Yang's brows. Instantly, a blood-red thread seeped into his palm. At the side of his wrist, it formed a light red diagram that was hard to see with the naked eye. This was the spirit race blood pact. From now on, with just a thought, he could control Yin Yang's life and death. Even all his descendants would become his servants. He originally didn't care, but then he suddenly felt a ball of mental intent explode out from within the blood thread, directly entering his brain. Numerous images and words appeared in front of Zhong Shou's eyes. It is the spirit race legacy blood root. In that instance, Zhong Shou understood Yin Yang's true intentions. If he could merge this blood root into his body, in just 7 to 8 years, his body could become the body of the spirit race. Even if he couldn't cultivate, he could cultivate soul power. However, the original owner of this legacy bloodroot would have to pay a huge price. Looking at Yin Yang in shock, Zhong Shou smiled expressionlessly. He knew that his servant's identity wasn't as simple as a disciple of a famous sect. Following which he didn't hesitate to seal the threads of spirit race power back into the light red diagram, totally locking it down. Thinking back to what Long Ruo said before, Zhong Shou's lips curled up coldly. He couldn't cultivate. He really wasn't willing to admit defeat just like that. He wanted to see whether or not he could use this body to climb to the peak of the martial path. Unfortunately, Long Ruo didn't speak in detail and didn't point out where his problems were. If he wanted to find out, he would have to spend a lot of effort. However, before that, he still had a huge problem to deal with. Zhong Shou looked around, only to see that the area was surrounded by hundreds of swamp wolves. Without the suppression of Zhao Yinran and the giant flood dragon, they all got close, their eyes filled with a red glow as they looked over in hunger. The closely packed numbers made one's head feel numb. This time he was really harmed by that crazy woman. P.S. The numbers are bleak. I feel a chill in my heart. Once again, I beg for everyone's support. Chapter 57 in the afternoon has been deleted and placed at the end. Chapter 56. Wolf cries spread out from the distance, occasionally mixed with the sad cries of the cloud-stepping foals. Zhao Yinran, who was sprinting on the ice surface, smirked. Her eyes shone with a trace of satisfaction from her successful revenge. Suddenly, he changed his direction and rushed up a nearby hill. Zhao Yinran looked in the direction she had come from, only to see that the cloud-riding carriage was racing against countless swamp wolves heading east. Giggling like a flower, Zhao Yinran frowned. The wound on her chest was even more painful. The poison in her body was still unable to be suppressed. She wiped her neck, only to see that her hand was covered in fresh blood. What should have been an insignificant wound was obstructed by a strange force, and it was unable to stop the bleeding even now. As expected, it is sword intent. 13 years old, and his sword path is one with the spirit. Muttering in her mouth, Zhao Yinran closed her eyes and thought back to that sword that seemed to come from the depths of hell. Her entire body instantly spasmed in pain. Different from before, in Zhao Yinran's eyes, this half-monster teen was not only not interesting, but he was also annoying. She was afraid in the end. In front of the pressure of that supreme sword technique, she didn't have the confidence to use that Zhong Shou as her energy seed furnace. In terms of her heart, there was already a weakness. In this world, there was actually someone she didn't have the confidence to win against. She flipped the bag she carried with her, only to see that there wasn't much left of the medicine. Zhao Yinran sighed, just as she was about to turn around and leave. In the next moment, she had an idea and stopped in her tracks. He reached into his pouch and took out a mirror that was about a foot long and wide. She directly placed a grade 4 beast crystal on the back of the mirror. A blue spiritual light flashed on the surface of the mirror. Zhao Yinran directly used the blood from her neck as ink to write on the surface of the mirror. The handwriting was messy, a total mess, not having the elegance of a girl. Instead, it was filled with a sharp glow, filled with a barbaric aura. The words she wrote were of the same style. Oi, old demonic woman, does your Taiyuan sect still lack people? Do you want another direct disciple? As soon as the words were written, the blood turned into specks of light and dissipated in all directions. It was only after a short moment that the mirror reacted. A few lines of words appeared on the surface of the mirror. At the very top was a portrait of a woman with simple lines. She was beautiful and cute, and she was currently in a state of rage. You crazy woman, if you dare to call me an old witch again, I will definitely eat you up. After a short while, the words disappeared completely, and then another line of words appeared. Don't you know that our Taiyuan sect lacks people, but a direct disciple? Would you be so kind? He has the qualifications to be a direct disciple of our Taiyuan sect. Your Seven Spirit sect doesn't want him, and instead, you are so embarrassed that you want to give him to us? Did the sun rise from the west today? I suspect. The painting of the beautiful woman also changed, her face filled with doubt. Zhao Yinran sked, still using blood as ink, and started to write on the surface of the mirror. If this fellow wasn't a male, and our Seven Spirit sect only accepts females, old witch, do you think I would tell you? So if it's a male, the expression of the beautiful woman's painting became colder. Tell me about it. If my mood is good, then I will consider it. Anyways, you crazy woman, every time you come to find me, nothing good will happen. You can't do anything right. With your eyesight, the person you recommend won't be much better. Our Taiyuan sect's luminous spiritual energy sword isn't something that anyone can learn. The corner of Zhao Yinran's lips twitched, resisting the urge to smash the copper mirror in her hand. A moment later, she laughed coldly, her eyes filled with a dark and vicious glow. Then what do you think about the person who broke the Lingyun sect's sky sword platform and the small heaven sword formation? Small heaven sword formation? Oh, that's not bad. However, he is only famous in Donglin Cloud Continent. 10 shrines, 19 spiritual houses. These sects all have their own spiritual lands. No matter which sect the direct disciples are from, they can easily break it. They just don't care about it. With such talent, you can barely enter my faction. What if this person is only 13 years old and only used a total of 343 breaths? The mirror was silent. Zhao Yinran felt like it wasn't enough, continuing to write. What if this person only used 4 hours to copy the 12 god steel's heaven talismans? This time she waited for a long time before the copper mirror reacted. Are you joking? Is there such a person in Donglin Cloud Continent? Crazy woman, are you sure? I didn't personally see it, but Lingyun Long Ruo personally said it. I don't believe it. If there is such a person, Lingyun's sect would most probably snatch him back to the mountain. How would they allow us to interfere? As a half-monster with a dual meridian body, I heard that there are hidden problems in his body and he is unable to break through to the bodily chakra realm. The beautiful woman's painting on the mirror instantly revealed an expression that said as expected. Even the words formed on the surface of the mirror seemed to be delighted. I knew it was like that. since he has a dual meridian body and is unable to break through the bodily chakra realm. What is the point of joining our Taiyuan sect? Zhao Yinran laughed coldly, waiting for the words to disappear before she wrote once more. 13 years old sword path 1 with the spirit. Using a martial master body to see the profoundness of sword intent. Disciple restricted my Xiantian true chi to fight with this person. On the 76th sword, I was injured and the sword wound was hard to heal, after which I lost all my fighting spirit and felt like I had no chance of winning, although the blood words were still fierce and overbearing. For some reason, it was mixed with an indescribable sense of loss and dejection. The copper mirror was silent once more. However, there were no more words after that. Instead, there was a cold and solemn voice. Using the copper mirror as a support, it spread from afar. Who is this person? Where is he now? Is he in the east of Donglin Cloud Continent? 13 years, old sword path 1 with the spirit? Are you trying to trick me? Zhao Yinran didn't have any intention to continue writing, directly keeping the mirror. Her feet froze once more as she slid down the hill, following which she heard an exasperated voice say, "Crazy woman, are you going to say it or not? Do you believe that I will rush to Seven Spirit Sect right now and sue you for disrespecting your elders?" Zhao Yinran's expression didn't change. Only a teasing expression appeared in her eyes. If you want to sue, then sue. Since someone said that she needs to consider, then let's wait for her to consider. Anyways, our Tsang Xingdao is not the only one who needs to find a legacy disciple. That voice instantly stopped, instantly turning into a fawning tone. Good Yinran, Senior Master is wrong. How about this? When we return, I will give you 5 more Fire Soul pills. Although you don't need them now. After a while, you can use them to charge for the return to Sun Realm. If not, I can give you that nameless sword. The corner of Zhao Yinran's lips curled up slightly, as the gloominess from before was swept away. Add another 20 foundation training pills, 20 snow spirit pills. If not, there is no need to talk. Zhao Yinran, you are crazy. His voice rose a full octave. The copper mirror in the bag also shook intensely. Zhao Yinran couldn't be bothered, her body suddenly increasing speed as she slid into the distance. Pretty much at the same time, in a certain building tens of thousands of miles away, a woman who looked to be in her 20s also stood up. She seemed to be in a daze. On the surface of the mirror in front of her, the line of words that Zhao Yinran had drawn appeared. 13 years, old sword path 1 with the spirit. Using the body of a martial master to see the profoundness of sword intent. Disciple restricted my Xiantian true chi to fight with this person. On the 76th sword, I was injured by a sword. The sword wound is hard to heal. After which, my fighting spirit disappeared, and I felt like I had no chance of winning. A weird glow flashed in the eyes of the beautiful girl. Is there really such a talent in this world? Is the heavens protecting our Taiyuan sect? Chapter 57. A wave-like warm current swam around in his stomach. It caused Zhongsho's body to be covered in sweat, drenching his shirt. Swallowing a foundation training pill was like swallowing a ball of fire. For a full 3 hours, Zhongsho's body felt like it was being roasted by fire. However, he didn't feel that it was tough at all. Instead, he felt delighted. The impurities in his body were being expelled by the medicinal power, and he felt extremely refreshed. Even the piercing pain that spread throughout his body didn't seem so unbearable anymore. It was still the spiritual breathing fist, but it was swaying in the wind. Each fist that he punched out had the roar of a dragon and tiger, fierce and overbearing. This fist technique had such a specialty. If the foundation and breathing weren't strong, then it would be weak and powerless. Once the embryonic and breathing meridians were formed, it would naturally be strong, and power couldn't predict it. The theories of the martial path were all connected. Fist theories and sword theories were different in details, but they were roughly similar. When Zhongsho punched out, it also contained a unique char within. There weren't many changes, but it was majestic. With each fist that he punched out, Zhongsho could only feel the warm current in his chest dissipate by a little. More medicinal power seeped into the muscles of his stomach, either dissipating or settling down. The embryonic and breathing meridians had expanded by close to double, and the energy within them was like a fountain flowing endlessly. The entire foundation training pill was slowly being refined. Only the essence was left, and it didn't dissipate, gathering at a spot near his energy ocean. Zhongsho wasn't anxious or impatient, his fist intent becoming gentle, causing the energy around his body to circulate several times before exploding out. Break! A clear shout that could crack metal and stone. Zhongsho punched out, firm and unyielding. A sharp whistle sounded out in the air, and the aftershock of the fist struck the side of the carriage. After a loud explosion, it actually caused the carriage to shake slightly. The wall of the carriage that had just been repaired not long ago was actually left with a shallow fist print. The medicinal essence in his body was forcefully dissipated and seeped into his embryo. At this moment, Zhongsho felt as if there was an extra piece of iron in his chest and abdomen, incomparably solid. This is what it means to be breathing like a spring and being as solid as a boulder. The spirit embryonic breathing fist of the Snow Robe Temple and the Seven Spirits embryonic pill of the Seven Spirits sect were indeed a perfect match. Just this one pill was enough to make up for all my hidden injuries. More than half of the foundation refining pill's efficacy had already dissipated. However, Zhongsho did not rest. Instead, he endured his exhaustion and began to practice his self-created Daoyin technique. This was the second set, suitable for martial masters. It targeted the 4 chakra meridians of the marrow, bone, blood, and intellect meridians. However, using it to disperse the remaining medicinal power still had a miraculous effect. It was still weird, mostly focusing on stretching the tendons, bones, muscles, and meridians. Zhongsho did not stop until the last trace of warmth had subsided in his body. He immediately took out a cleansing talisman and used it to absorb the sweat and dirt, make the whole body clean again. This spirit master's talisman technique is really convenient. Not only can it be used to kill people, but it can also be used in every aspect of life. No wonder those spirit masters are all so lazy. To make the body feel fresh, one cleansing talisman can do it, so why do they need to bathe? Unfortunately, Qi Xiao doesn't have many of these talismans. I have to focus on cultivation now and don't have the time to draw them. Stopping all these random thoughts, Zhongsho looked into his body. A glow of surprise flashed across his eyes. The foundation and breathing meridians were not only removed, but they were also strengthened by a lot. With such a foundation, it would be easy for him to refine his marrow in the future. He could also be at ease attacking the bone chakra, not needing to wait 3 months. To train the foundation and breathing, the Seven Spirit Sect's Seven Spirit Foundation Refining Pill is the best, only second to the Human Pinnacle Pill. Before this, I didn't believe it, but now I know that the rumors are true. To be able to get 3 at once, I am really lucky. Next is the marrow training. That blood maniac monster, Saint, stored 20 portions of tiger marrow dragon bone powder in the Sanlu Bank, made from grade 2 tiger marrow and the bones of a grade 2 giant snake. However, in terms of marrow and bone training, the best spiritual medicine in the Donglin Cloud world is the Yunluo pill of the Lingyun sect. However, I probably won't be able to use this thing. He gave out a self-mocking laugh. At this moment, Zhongsho was rejoicing about his luck. However, he didn't know that hundreds of miles away, the girl who lost the pill to him had already sold him for 10 times the price of the bet. Adjusting his breathing slightly, his aura stabilized. Zhongsho took out a blue pill and swallowed it. This snow spirit pill was, as its name suggested, extremely cold. The moment Zhongsho swallowed it, his body shuddered. Compared to the foundation refining pill from before, it was totally different. He didn't need to control it, and threads of cold energy directly entered his soul ocean from his Shunshao acupoint. The yin power of heaven and earth suddenly gathered and wrapped around his soul. The moment the cold energy seeped in, it was swept up by the whirlpool in his soul ocean and turned into bits of pure soul power. What was interesting was that those impure soul power and foreign objects that couldn't be noticed in the past were all frozen under the injection of this cold energy. This snow spirit pill is really not bad. Zhongsho's heart shook as he focused on eliminating them one by one. Not long later, his entire soul ocean was cleared out by him. Unfortunately, the medicinal effects of the snow spirit pill were slowly fading. At this moment, the changes in his soul surprised Zhongsho. My total soul power has increased by 10%. My soul is also much purer. That wasn't all. Even the internal injuries that he had sustained from using the heavenly mirror soul illumination technique to temper his soul power had been healed. Who knew it would have such a miraculous effect? Unfortunately, the effect of the medicine was just too short. In total, he had only used less than an hour. Looking at the pill bottle in his hand, Zhongsho decisively kept it. If it could only increase soul power and purify the soul, he wouldn't hesitate to use it consecutively. However, since this item had the ability to heal his injuries, he couldn't waste it so easily. Coincidentally, at this moment, Zhongsho suddenly sensed something and looked forward. He only felt that at the shaft of the carriage, there was a strong spiritual energy fluctuation that spread hundreds of feet around. It lasted for close to 10 minutes before it slowly disappeared. What a waste, just a step away from Xiantian. Since he broke away from the wolf pack, Yin would enter such a state from time to time. He would cause spiritual energy fluctuations, but after a short moment, it would stop. This was the sign that his cultivation had touched the gate to Xiantian. Before this, Yin Yang's foundations under the restrictions of the restrictions were simply too strong. At this moment, he was just a step away from Xiantian and becoming a Xiantian master. However, this matter wasn't urgent. Even if he didn't succeed this time, he would be able to break through in a few days. Who knows whether or not I harmed him? If he is able to use his own strength to break through Xiantian and break through the restrictions before he turns 40, Yin Yang's future achievements would be limitless. Let's hope that bottle of blood cloud marrow can help. This item can strengthen the skin and give birth to blood and flesh. The effects aren't bad. Just as he thought about that, Zhongsho felt a strong sense of sleepiness and exhaustion suddenly attack him. With his mental fortitude, he was actually unable to block it. His head tilted to the side, and he totally entered dreamland. In a daze, his mind came to an extremely empty and dark place. Only to see that everywhere was silent and chaotic, he couldn't see the boundaries clearly. Where's this place? Zhongsho frowned slightly, suddenly comprehending something. Then, a small ball of light appeared in front of his eyes. P.S. Due to Chapter 57 being updated yesterday, this chapter is compensation. Comrades, my ranking is about to drop by 2 places. There's still 4 days until I drop off the new book rankings. Please help me open up a wasteland. Also, you can appoint Model Bamboo, a book friend in the prime of youth, and also a girl, shamelessly asking for her QQ number. In the end, I posted pictures of Jiangsu and Chu Shui. Chapter 58. So, I am in my own mental world. But why is there light there? Thinking about it, Zhongsho smiled and walked over. Understanding where he was, he didn't have any more doubts about this place. It actually formed a body here, which was exactly what he looked like in his last life. With just a thought, he got close to the ball of light, only to see that there was a giant sapphire blue glow. He couldn't see what was inside, but the ripples it gave off made one's heart palpitate. What Zhongsho was most concerned about was a person not far away. Around 13 years old, his face was even more beautiful than girls. It was the body he was occupying, which was Zhongsho's appearance. Standing in front of the glow, he looked over. His expression was surprisingly calm. "You are here. I have waited for you for so long." Zhongsho smiled, walking in front of the teen as expected and waving his hand. A tea table appeared in front of him, a pot of wine, and a few teacups. Since this was his mental world, it could be considered a dream, so naturally he could do whatever he wanted. Sitting down, Zhongsho poured the wine and made an inviting gesture, smiling. You are Zhongsho? Don't stand, let's sit down and talk. Speaking of which, it was weird. That teen was the one who was born in the royal family. Be it in terms of looks or clothes, they were top-notch. As for Zhongsho, he could only be considered slightly handsome, wearing a normal green shirt. However, at this moment, he looked more like an elegant prince than the teen. His clothes were normal, but he gave off a noble aura. His actions were casual, but there was an indescribable elegance. He should be weaker than the teen, but the latter was like a firefly in front of him, incomparable to the moon. That teen was slightly distracted, but he didn't reject, sitting down in front of Zhongsho. Picking up the wine cup and drinking a mouthful, he felt that it was exceptionally delicious. Who knew how Zhongsho managed to create it? After drinking it in one gulp, the young man hesitated for a moment before speaking again. Ever since I fell unconscious that day, I've always wanted to see you. Zhongsho nodded slightly and continued to pour wine for himself. He said indifferently, Do you want this body back? If this young man wanted it, he really didn't care. It wasn't his to begin with, so there was no need for him to take it by force. Even at this moment, he was still reluctant to part with life. He also wanted to see what the millions of worlds were like 10,000 years ago. Originally, he thought that the owner of his body had already died, so he let it go. But since this person's consciousness was still present, it was a little embarrassing. Naturally, he did not have the intention to end his life so easily. After all, as long as his spirit was still there would always be a way to survive. Unexpectedly, the young man shook his head. You were able to obtain my 13 years of memories. Naturally, I was also able to see your past life. I know that you came from 10,000 years in the future. In your previous life, your name was Tanshio. In that game known as God Emperor, you were known as the Sword Emperor. Be in the real world or virtual world, you were a huge headache for both the righteous and demonic sects. Zhongsho couldn't help but smile. The word headache was used really well. However, in the eyes of those experts who stood at the peak of the martial path or spiritual cultivation, to him at that time could at most make them pay attention to him. He was no different from a fly. At the start, I want to get my body back. But in the end, I didn't think that way anymore. The young man said this quietly. His tone was really calm, like he wasn't talking about his own matters. I know that in your last life, you were the same as me, even more so than me. You didn't have an illustrious background and didn't have a father who could protect you from the wind and rain. Your body chakra was broken and the difficulty of cultivation was no weaker than mine. But in the end, the outcome was totally different. Even if you were in a desperate situation with a few ups and downs, you could still work hard and grow into a huge tree. I only know how to blame the heavens and hate the heavens for being unfair. You should know that in the last 2 years in Linhai College, I had already given up on despair. If it wasn't for the stimulation of not knowing where my father was, I wouldn't have taken the risk. Zhongsho kept silent. Actually, this fellow's personality could be considered tough. However, in the last 2 years, he looked down on him. Since he had the body of a man, then even if he was stepped into the mud, he had to have the heart to climb out. However, looking at how dejected and depressed this fellow was, Zhongsho didn't plan to say anything. Then I found out that even if I didn't die this time, there would be a day where my head would be chopped off and my corpse would be exposed for months. So, because of me, my father would offend Ling Yun's sect and die early. He also knew that our monster race would be wiped out one by one in the next 1,000 years. As he said that, the teen gave a self-mocking laugh. So what if I give my body to you? At least what you can do is much better than what I can do. Zhongsho's face didn't show any joy at all. He knew that the teen hadn't finished speaking. In this world, there were no benefits for free. You went to Cloud Saint City not only to take the spiritual herbs there, but also to avoid the Gantian Mountain conflict, right? You didn't even care about the Monster King position. The teen smiled bitterly, his voice getting weaker and weaker. At least I know my place. Even if I have all your memories, I don't dare to say that I can change my fate and break through the chakra meridians. I don't ask for anything else. Gantian Mountain is what my father worked so hard to build, and I don't want it to fall into the hands of others. Also, my father and my mother that I haven't met. Zhongsho only hopes that the two of them can live on peacefully. Treat it as my last wish. Zhongsho didn't care about the words before, calmly drinking his wine. Only until the last two sentences did his expression change slightly. In the next moment, he frowned slightly. At this moment, the young man's consciousness was gradually dispersing, taking the initiative to merge into his soul. Not only was his voice getting softer and softer, but his body was also getting fainter and fainter. Zhongsho wanted to help, but there was nothing he could do. All of a sudden, Zhongsho didn't know what to say at this moment. His goal of going to Cloud Saint City was to avoid it. Although he didn't plan on leaving Donglin Cloud Continent, he also didn't plan on joining in the Gantian Mountain conflict. Wouldn't it be better to roam freely and read all the books in the world? Sighing deeply, Zhongsho looked at the other side, at the giant blue glow. Oi, let me ask you one last time. What is within this ball of light? Why is it so scary just looking at it? This, I'm not sure. I only know that when I woke up, this thing was already here. You brought over, so why ask me? The teen smiled, his expression deep and indiscernible. Anyways, sooner or later you will know. You will know that I am you and you are me. The two of us are one. Zhongsho's brows instantly furrowed. When he woke up, this thing was already here. Did this woke up refer to after he took over this body? The thing he brought over? How is that possible? And what was that? I am you and you are me. The two of them were one. What kind of nonsense was that? No matter how he heard it, it sounded a little ambiguous. He felt a chill run down his spine, goosebumps appearing all over his body. Just as he wanted to ask more, the teen's body had already disappeared without trace. In the next moment, wave after wave of grievances, unwillingness, rage, fear, anticipation, numerous emotions surged into his chest like a flood. Zhongsho knew that these were all the feelings of the teen. They didn't come from him, but for some reason, he felt the same way. P.S. Counting down the new book list. Hey, this month there are so many gods. Chapter 59. Retreating from the dark space of consciousness, Zhongsho fell into a deep sleep. After a period of time, he slowly woke up. Looking out of the window, it should be morning. The first ray of sunlight pierced through the darkness and through the clouds. This meant that he had slept for a full day and night. Speaking of which, since coming to this era, apart from the first few days, Zhongsho had never had such a good night's sleep. During these few months, even if he meditated every night to recover, the tiredness was still accumulating. I've finally woken up. This time I was really screwed over by that demon girl. This time, the reason why he was able to enter the depths of his consciousness was most likely due to the aftereffects of the Netherworld song that Zhao Yanran had played. Only with such a chance could he meet the real Zhongsho. Moving his arms and legs, he felt that not only was his body comfortable, but his mind was also filled with energy. However, thinking about the teen that had totally disappeared from this world, Zhongsho couldn't help but feel sad. Gantian Mountain Monster King? That really gave me a huge problem. This position isn't so easy to fight for. A bitter smile appeared on his face, but a serious expression slowly appeared in his eyes. In a dream, although he didn't personally agree, since it was the last wish of that Zhongsho, then no matter what, he would think of a way to do it. Since he had taken over this body, he could use this body to continue climbing to the peak of his dreams. He had to do something for that teen. Who knows if it was because he had swallowed the soul of the real Zhongsho and merged with his close to 13 years of memories and emotions. Thinking about how the Gantian mountain that his father had personally created might fall into the hands of Zhongsho or Zhongyang, he felt really uncomfortable. Unknowingly, he put his emotions into this identity. Forget it. What's the harm in fighting for it? In the last life, I had no one to rely on and dare to go against those big sects of the cloud world. Can those people from Gantian Mountain be stronger than Lingyun sect? With a disdainful sneer, Zhongsho remembered the sapphire blue halo again. From the young man's words, It seemed like he had brought this thing back from 10,000 years in the future. However, he had no idea what it was. Scratching his head in confusion, Zhongshou was stunned again. He only felt a furry feeling in his palm. It wasn't hair, but something that looked like a beast's ears. Behind him, there seemed to be something floating around unconsciously, stirring up a breeze from time to time. Zhongshou's face turned slightly pale. He quickly stood in front of the bronze mirror in the carriage. Then, as if he had been struck by lightning, he was completely rooted to the ground. At this moment, not only were there 2 white fox ears on both sides of his head, but there were also 2 white fox ears. 2 snow-white tails appeared behind it. They were about 3 feet long and were constantly swaying. After being stunned for a long while, Zhongshou finally came back to his senses. Within the carriage, there was an exclamation, the volume of which was comparable to a woman's scream. "Young master, what happened? What happened?" Chu Shui and Yin Yang both charged into the carriage right away. The former's eyes were filled with worry as she hurriedly ran in. When she looked at Zhongshou, she was shocked, following which she was slightly delighted. "Monster body? Young master, the sky fox blood in your body has finally awakened. The heavens bless you." "Sky fox blood? It's awake?" Zhongshou slowly came back to his senses from the shock, slowly calming down. It was because the image in the mirror was too shocking. Even with his mental state cultivation, he was unable to remain calm. Being reminded by Chu Shui's words, he remembered that every 12 years the monster race would awaken their bloodline and have their own bloodline, bringing about various abilities. For example, Chu Shui had limitless strength, nimble and quick, and her intuition was accurate. The bloodline of the 7-tailed sky fox was above that of the tiger-cat race. Originally, based on his age, it should have awakened long ago. For it to drag on till today should be because his original body was unable to cultivate. It is the sky fox bloodline. Chu Shui's eyes shone brightly as she looked at Zhongshou. She only felt that the current young master was cute to the extreme. She resisted the urge to rush over and hug him, explaining, "Fox ears and tail, and it is pure white with star patterns. It should be the purest sky, fox blood. Those elders of Gantian Mountain always say that your bloodline isn't pure." Scoff. This time when we return to Gantian Mountain, let's see what they say. It is indeed worth celebrating. Yin Yang nodded slightly, his expression filled with joy. If the ruler knows, he will be really happy. 2 generations of pure sky, fox blood. The ruler and the prince should be the true, direct bloodline of the sky, fox Zhong family. Zhongshou took a closer look and noticed that be it the tail and the fox ears, there were star-like patterns. However, the color was really light and hard to notice. In the next moment, his head was filled with black lines. If he had to face people like this for the rest of his life, then he might as well kill him. After thinking about it carefully, he finally felt at ease. He could only be considered a half-monster. His body was 70% human bloodline and 1/8 sky fox blood. Moreover, his human bloodline was no weaker than the former. Every month, he only had a short day to show his monster body. He just had to bear with it for a while. At most, when he showed his monster body, he would just hide and not see anyone. He consoled himself in his heart. However, in just a moment, Zhongshou started to feel conflicted once more. However, this day was abnormally unbearable. Zhao Yanran, from now on, you and I will never live under the same sky. Clenching his fists, Zhongshou gritted his teeth. For some reason, he totally hated Zhao Yanran. Why didn't the sky, fox bloodline awaken earlier or later? Why did it have to happen after he swallowed the soul of the true Zhongshou? To say that it was because of this woman made sense. Then he was a little curious about what kind of ability the sky, fox bloodline in his body would give him. The purest 7-tailed sky, fox blood, in Chu Shui's mouth shouldn't be too bad. Thinking about it, he did it right away. When Yin Yang and Chu Shui came out of the carriage, Zhongshou silently activated his internal energy. First, his body moved forward slightly. In an instant, he flew dozens of feet. This speed is at least 20% faster than before. I have only awakened 2 tails. When I reach 7 tails, how strong will I be? Legend has it that when my father was born, he already had 9 tails. This bloodline can be strengthened. His body stopped. Shock flashed across Zongsho's eyes. No wonder the monster race was so strong 10,000 years ago. They were the main force against the monsters and demons of the various worlds during the Desolate Era. If everyone had such talent, they would far exceed the human race. The only thing that was difficult was reproduction. In 10,000 years, they were unable to develop and strengthen. He punched out once more to test his strength. He only felt that it had increased slightly, but it wasn't obvious. However, his bones and muscles were much stronger and could take more strength. However, for some reason, there was a violent and bloodthirsty intent hidden in his chest. If it wasn't for his heart being clear, he wouldn't be able to notice it. I remember those history books said that the monster race was violent and violent. They were really bloodthirsty and their methods were cruel. It seems like it made sense. After merging with the blood of those strong, ancient beasts, I also inherited a portion of their nature. This should be the main reason why the monster race was rejected by the Cloud World. I can't blame the human race for being ungrateful. Chapter 60. The legendary 7-tail Sky Fox bloodline wasn't good at strength. Only in terms of agility, it was okay. However, his talent was one of the best among all the demon clans. The reason was because of its illusionary talent. As long as one had the Sky Fox bloodline, if one was a spirit master, they were naturally good at illusionary techniques. If one was a martial cultivator, their ability in this area would be really outstanding. Recalling the indefinite Spirit Emperor art in his memory, as well as the set of fist techniques, the indefinite killing fist. With the martial path experience of his last life, Zongsho only needed to comprehend the patterns and incantations before he grasped a portion of the mysteries of this fist. Punching out, instantly one could see many fist images appear in front of him, ethereal and unfathomable. What a good fist technique! Zongsho's eyes lit up according to the memory of this body. This indefinite Spirit Emperor art and indefinite killing fist were self-created martial arts by Zone Weiran. At this moment, although Zongsho only had a rough idea of it, he knew that this cultivation method could enter the grade 6 level. Its potential was limitless, and there was still the possibility of it rising. Along with the talent of the Sky Fox race, power was even stronger and indiscernible. From this, one could see that Zone Weiran's martial path had reached an extremely high level. Unfortunately, he wasn't good at fist techniques and didn't study the path of illusionary martial arts. However, with his martial path achievements in his last life, after comprehending this indefinite killing fist, creating an illusionary sword technique was an extremely simple matter. After testing his physical techniques, Zongsho started to test his spiritual techniques. At the Spirit Observing Realm, one could use some low-grade spells with lower strength. Although he didn't cultivate spiritual energy in his last life, he was at the Grandmaster level of talismans. At this moment, he casually summoned it. Just one hand gesture and a ball of illusionary mist spread throughout the carriage. If I have the help of this technique, no one below a 9 Meridian Mythic Master can block my indefinite killing fist. However, in the eyes of those Xiantian Masters, it is just child's play. After waiting for 15 minutes for the mist to dissipate, Zongsho's hand signs changed once more. Then, 2 illusionary images appeared around him. It was very lifelike, but its face was a little stiff. Zongsho looked around, and then his brows furrowed. It wasn't that the illusionary body technique was weak. Even though their expressions and movements were somewhat fake, once they were in the midst of battle, how many people would be able to accurately distinguish between them in the blink of an eye? On the contrary, the effect was much better than he had expected. That's not right. Power seems to be much stronger than the other spirit masters when I use these illusion Dao arts, and it was at least twice as much. Why was that? I remember that I don't have any spiritual weapons on me. Could it be that the 7-tailed fox bloodline is really that powerful? Zhong Shou only muttered to himself for a while before he decisively sat down cross-legged. He calmed his mind and entered meditation. Although there were some people with abnormal bloodlines in the demon race, even a divine beast bloodline like the seven-tailed heavenly fox could not surpass it by much. There should be another reason for his current situation. His consciousness entered his soul power sea and observed carefully. A moment later, Zhong Shou knew the reason, only to see that the spiritual energy spouting out from the depths of the whirlpool had increased by a full 50%. Weird. My soul source seems to have grown by close to 50%. Is this because of merging with that little fellow's soul? The increase of his soul source was not much to him who had the heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique. However, the increase in spiritual cultivation power was enough to make those spirit masters jealous to the point of going crazy. Following which, he felt that there were two more spiritual energy sources in his soul ocean. Zhong Shou split out two threads of his consciousness and reached over. He saw that the source of the spiritual energy was the two foxtails that were swaying around behind him. Not only was it absorbing spiritual energy, but it also allowed him to control the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as he wished. Zhong Shou couldn't help but be enlightened. So the foxtails had such an ability and weren't totally useless. Harmonizing and absorbing spiritual energy of heaven and earth was not only beneficial to soul power cultivation, but it could also strengthen spells and increase the speed of forming seals and curses. Other people needed 10 breaths of time to use spells. If it was him, you might only need 9 or close to 8 breaths. Just looking at this little bit of time, it allowed him to have a suppressive advantage over those normal spirit masters. This body of mine can't cultivate. Who knew that the soul power path of spirit masters would have such talent? Zhong Shou couldn't help but mock himself. Originally, he cultivated spells to suppress and ease the conflict between his monster and man bloodlines. However, if he didn't work hard now, it would be a waste of this top talent. Opening his eyes, Zhong Shou took out a jug of wine and 2 cups. After filling it up, he drank 1 cup himself and poured the other in front of him. Here's a toast to you. Have a good trip. His eyes filled with sadness, Zhong Shou silently poured wine once more. At this moment, apart from him, no one would know that just yesterday, a team with a cruel fate had silently disappeared from this heaven and earth, never to exist again. Who knows when, but within the black soil swamp, it started to rain once more. At a place filled with wolf bones and corpses, a red-shirt girl was holding an umbrella, standing gracefully in the rain. The red embroidered shoes on her feet were half a foot in the air, stepping on air. Her crescent moon-like brows were furrowed. Her watery eyes were carefully looking at this place, looking at all traces. Tens of days had passed, and those dead swamp wolves were only left with a pile of white bones. A day ago, there was a rainstorm here, washing this place clean. However, in the eyes of the girl, there was still some information that could attract her attention. So Lingyun Long Ruo's green flood dragon has advanced. In 20 years, won't it become a dragon? This little fellow's luck is not bad, to have a dragon-shaped protector beast. He is better than the other direct disciples of the same generation. However, the place where the girl's eyes stopped, it was still that unassuming flat land in the distance. It really is sword intent. After 17 days, there is still a thread of sword intent remaining, but it doesn't seem like it. Who is the one who left this behind? Is this person really less than 13 years old? Only a martial master? In the distance, a person suddenly appeared in the rain. Looking out, it was Zhao Yinran. She still turned from water to ice as she glided over. The red-shirt girl still felt that she was too slow. With a flash, she was 300 feet in front of Zhao Yinran. Just as she was about to open her mouth to ask, she suddenly saw that on Zhao Yinran's neck there was a black line. That girl was instantly startled. In the next moment, her body flashed, and she was in front of Zhao Yinran. A white hand shot out and grabbed that snow-white neck, lifting her up from the ground. Zhao Yinran wasn't shocked, only unhappily saying, "Old demon witch, You want to strangle me to death? Why aren't you letting go? Before he could finish his sentence, he was knocked on the head. The woman in red said coldly, "Impudent. Call me Martial Ant." However, she didn't have any intentions of letting go, her eyes staring right at that black line on Zhao Yinran's neck. This was originally a wound, but for some reason, not only did it not heal, but it also rotted, making one feel disgusted. Compared to the skin beside it that was even whiter than snow, it formed a huge contrast. The red shirt girl looked on for an hour before she heaved a sigh of relief, finally placing Zhao Yinran down. This sword intent isn't formed. Why didn't you scatter it? With your ability, it shouldn't be hard to do. Chapter 61. This sword intent is a little weird and is a little difficult. However, 17 days of time, I could have removed it a few days earlier. However, who do you think I did it for? Didn't I keep it so that you can take a look? Zhao Yinran scoffed, reaching out her hand without any hesitation. Hand it over. 20 foundation training pills, 20 snow spirit pills, 5 fire soul pills, 1 snow soul nameless sword. Leaving this sword intent for so many days, I've already let you down. That red shirt girl wasn't annoyed, casually wiping the black wound, only to see a weird ripple appear in the surrounding air. Coincidentally, a few flies and mosquitoes passed by. They were struck by the ripple and instantly fell to the ground, no longer having any life. In the surrounding 10 feet, all the weeds had withered. Crazy bitch, you should be glad that you weren't rash and that I rushed over. If you rashly removed it, you will suffer. While saying this, the red shirt girl looked at the withered grass in awe. What a good sword intent. I have never seen or heard of such a thing. Killing without mercy and also bringing with it thick death energy. Luckily, this person's cultivation wasn't enough and the sword intent wasn't formed, unable to fully express it. If not, you would have died long ago. Zhao Yanran was startled, her heart still filled with fear as she touched her neck. Although she knew the consequences of rashly removing it, she wouldn't be able to do anything to her. However, she couldn't avoid being injured once more. Her aura instantly stopped and she felt a little weak. However, in the next moment, she said confidently, "So what? To be able to hide the sword intent and not release it? Old demon bitch, aren't you happy? You must have laughed just now, right? Don't try to hide it from me, I saw it. In this world, who is more suitable than him to learn your Taiyuan Sect's luminous spiritual sword?" The red shirt girl only felt a headache, using her hand to face palm. "My sister is so smart. Why did she accept a disciple like you? If you continue to be so rude, although I won't eat you, I will throw you into the Jinan cave. I'm sure those eminent monks will be very happy to chant sutras for 100 days to reform a demoness like you." Zhao Yinran's pupils immediately shrank, and a trace of fear and timidity appeared on her face. She was not afraid of anything, but she was most afraid of listening to those monks chanting scriptures. However, the woman in red only spoke half of her sentence before she could no longer suppress a smile on her face. "Forget it. For you to be able to find such a genius for my Taiyuan sect, it could be considered a great contribution. It's just some pills and a broken sword. Are you afraid that I'll shortchange you? Let's wait until this matter is settled first." Zhao Yinran's eyes flashed, revealing a strong sense of suspicion. "Martial uncle, do you know how to write the word trust?" It's not that martial niece doesn't believe you, but martial uncle, you've never kept your word. I suspect. In the end, he was still a little afraid and didn't dare to call her old witch. As for the red-clothed woman, her face was also completely red. It was obvious that she was angry from embarrassment. She awkwardly coughed, and then her eyes turned dark and cold. "Stop talking nonsense. Where is that person? What is his name? Where did he come from? If I can't find a junior brother, then it's not just the Jianan Cave, but the Two-World Mountain Ming Miao Temple. Junior brother? You really aren't polite." Zhao Yinran's face turned white once more, but she didn't admit defeat. "He might not even be interested in that Lingyun sect, so he might not be willing to enter your Taiyuan sect. With his talent, No matter which sect in the world he can't enter. Ling Yun's sect. The red-clothed woman burst out laughing, scoffing coldly. It's just a weak shrine sect. My Taiyuan sect controls the 3rd and 7th shrines. He has no choice but to agree. Whoever dares to snatch from me, I'll destroy him. Within the black soil swamp, it was drizzling. However, thousands of miles away, the sun shone brightly. During these 10 days, the place where Zhongsho trained had changed from within the carriage to the roof of the carriage, occupying Xue Xue's territory. Although the bones and marrow of a person were warm, they were the source of yang energy. However, in the deepest parts of the body, after accumulating day by day, there would be a lot of yin and cold energy, which was why it was best to choose a place where the sun shone brightly. Using the help of the sun to chase away the cold energy, the effect of training the bones and marrow could be said to be twice the result with half the effort. As for this marrow training body technique, Zhongsho chose the monster race's secret marrow training technique, the Great Blazing Sun Fist. In his memory, this was a top bone marrow tempering technique passed down by the legendary demon clan. In the ancient records, it was said by numerous martial arts masters to be the best in the same kind of cultivation technique, suppressing all others. However, in the future, there were very few humans who cultivated it. Due to the different body types of humans and monsters, the effects would naturally be different. At this moment, since Zhongsho had awakened his monster body, using this fist technique would naturally complement one another, which was why he decisively tossed aside the other top marrow training techniques in his memory and directly chose this monster race technique. Different from the spiritual breathing fist, this Great Blazing Sun Fist started off with a strong fist aura. At the roof of the carriage, it clashed with the wind around, giving off a loud, ringing sound. Zhongsho's footsteps were of a different style, extremely nimble and nimble. At this moment, the cloud-crossing carriage had already exited the black soil swamp and entered an endless mountain region. The carriage would occasionally shake and rise along with the terrain. However, Zhongsho's body wasn't affected at all. It was like there was a suction cup under his feet, standing firmly on the roof of the carriage, his body freely moving about. Chu Shui looked on quietly at the side, unable to take her eyes off him. Even Yin Yang, who was driving the carriage at the front, wasn't paying attention. Most of the time, he was looking back, carefully observing Zhongsho's fist technique. Although the two of them had passed this stage, they knew that this was a rare opportunity. Not only was the fist technique itself a rare technique, but the martial path concepts that Zhongsho displayed when he trained were also thought-provoking. The more he trained, the softer the fist energy became. In the end, it was totally different from the strength of the Great Blazing Sun Fist. Instead, it was similar to the initial stage of the spiritual breathing fist, soft and fluffy. However, every time he punched out, there would always be a muffled sound of air. The aura wasn't obvious, but due to the swift movement of the carriage, the wind that it caused was pushed dozens of feet away. Chu Shui didn't understand much, but she knew that learning from her young master wouldn't be wrong. She still remembered that day when Zhongsho used 76 swords to force Zhao Yanran to admit defeat. On the sky sword platform, he broke 18 swords of the puppet. Yin Yang's eyes became brighter and brighter. One of his hands couldn't help but follow along with Zhongsho's fist. The aura around his body started to flicker, spiritual energy surging. However, it was suppressed by an invisible barrier, unable to break through. Roughly 10 minutes later, Zhongsho finally fell down powerlessly. This Great Blazing Sun Fist used up a lot of stamina. To be able to last for 30 minutes was already due to the recent increase in his soul power, suppressing his dual meridians and improving his body constitution. A stable foundation and breathing are truly boundless benefits. In just 17 days, my marrow training is already at the last step. In my last life, I used a full year to complete this step. 3 consecutive 7-spirit foundation training pills caused Zhongsho's foundation to be strong to the extreme. As for this marrow training, it was also a natural process. The hundreds of bones in his body seemed to have an additional ball of warm flames, providing large amounts of vital energy. In just 3 days, he would be able to completely melt away the accumulated energy in his marrow. Chapter 62. Zhongsho laid powerlessly on the roof of the carriage, but he still tried his best to maintain the circulation in his body. He shook the muscles in his body, using the internal breathing technique to absorb the power of the sun. His limbs felt warm, as if he was standing beside a flame. However, within his soul, he only felt waves of discomfort. Soul power was of the attribute and couldn't handle the fire of the sun. However, when Spirit Masters started cultivating, they needed to accumulate large amounts of soul power. This was where it clashed with martial cultivation, and it would only get better when one reached the return to Sun realm. However, martial cultivation wasn't without its benefits. A strong body and abundant vital energy could be the foundation for soul power to grow. Under the scorching sun, pretty much every moment that passed, Zhongsho felt his body becoming a little stronger. Unfortunately, Yin-Yang still hadn't broken through to the Xiantian realm. After recovering some strength, Zhongsho sighed and sat up. Uncle Yin, don't be anxious. Although breaking through to the Xiantian realm also depends on luck. However, you have already touched that barrier, and you will probably advance in half a month. As long as you put your mind to it, you don't need to be deliberate. Who knows, you might be able to do it tomorrow. Thank you for your advice. Yin-Yang, who was focused on driving, turned around and smiled when he heard that. His face didn't show any signs of depression, only a little apologetic. Yin-Yang isn't anxious. I just feel that I have let you down. During these few days, you spent so much time to show me the mysteries of the martial path. However, Yin-Yang's talent is too stupid, and he still can't break through. Zhongsho laughed. As expected, his servant had seen through it long ago. He had specially practiced the great blazing sun fist on the carriage with the intention of teaching these two people. Following which he heard Yin-Yang ask curiously, Prince, 17 days ago, when you fought with Zhao Yanran, did you use sword intent? Why are you asking this? Zhongsho's brows furrowed, and then he gave out a self-mocking laugh. To use sword intent, one has to be at least martial ancestor. How can I have that right now? To be able to understand the rhythm of the sword technique is already not bad. Something's wrong. Yin-Yang shook his head solemnly, his eyes filled with disbelief. Ever since that day, I've been thinking about the Crown Prince's swordsmanship every day. The more I think about it, the more unfathomable it is. I only feel that the Crown Prince's martial arts achievements are several times better than mine. Especially the last sword. Yin-Yang had no recollection of it at all. Or should I say that I can't remember? Hearing this, Chu Shui's eyes widened. She tried to recall carefully. Sure enough, she did not have the slightest impression of the last sword strike that had repelled Zhao Yanran. He had clearly seen it with his own eyes more than 10 days ago. When the demoness left, she said that Your Highness's sword Dao was already connected to the spirit. She also asked if Your Highness knew about sword intent. At that time, even if the Crown Prince did not use the sword will, I'm afraid he was not far off. Zhongsho smiled but did not answer. He thought to himself, so what if this martial will is profound? With his current situation, even if Zhao Yanran did not use Xiantian True Qi, he could only win by a hair's breadth. However, for Yin-Yang to be able to see all this, it meant that the day he broke through to the Xiantian realm was really fast. Just as he was about to give a few more pointers, Zhongsho's brows furrowed as he looked to the front. What is that doing? Without needing Zhongsho to remind him, Yin-Yang and Chu Shui had already noticed the abnormality in front of them. About 3,000 meters away, there was a surging river. It was at the height difference where a giant silver waterfall fell 3,000 feet, giving rise to the sound of thunder. There were dense forests on both sides of this place, the tallest trees reaching 400 feet. Only the center could allow carriages and people to pass through. However, at this moment, there were hundreds of different types of carriages blocking this path. The people on the carriages all looked anxiously in the direction of the riverbank. Zhongsho was a little curious. After standing up, he stood on his tiptoes and looked into the distance. He could vaguely see a figure sitting in the middle of the waterfall. His expression could not be seen clearly, but from his actions, he seemed to be sighing. There was nothing special about this person, but the carriages on both sides of the riverbank did not dare to pass and block the entrance. Zhongsho's expression also slightly froze. His gaze moved to the side of this person, where there was a giant black steel saber. It looked like a saber, but it was more accurate to say that it was a giant steel plate. It was about 10 feet long and stabbed into the ground. There were dragon patterns on it, and just looking at it gave off a huge sense of oppression. Apart from this person and the saber, there were also a dozen burly servants standing at the intersection, blocking all the carriages at the crossing. Why does this saber feel so familiar? Zhongsho fell into deep thought. What he was familiar with was not the saber, but the intent and spirituality on the saber. This was something that the owner of the saber had poured into and nurtured day and night. On the other side, Yin Yang directly leaped out, crossing the land and arriving in front in just a dozen steps. He casually found a person to ask about what was going on. A moment later, his face was ashen white as he walked back. Prince, I heard that the person in front is comprehending martial arts. Look at the Mingjing Mountain and Fallen Cloud waterfall. He doesn't want people to disturb him and ruin the intent of this place, so he doesn't allow anyone to pass. I heard that this person has been sitting here for 7 to 8 days. Comprehending martial arts? Zhongsho frowned and looked to the east. There was a giant mountain there. Not only was it shaped like a mirror, the side facing him was also as smooth as a mirror, like one could see one's reflection. This place could be said to be famous mountains and rivers, and martial cultivators loved to learn from heaven and earth. It made sense for them to comprehend martial arts here. There's so many carriages on both sides of the river, so why is no one unhappy? Although this place was not a place that one had to pass to get to Cloud Saint City, it was the closest and most convenient way. The Diyuan River flowed 3,000 miles, and even where it started, it was 5,000 feet wide. Most parts of the river flowed quickly, and only at this place where the Fallen Cloud waterfall landed, the water flow was slightly calm. Yin Yang's expression was even uglier. The few merchant groups here all have martial masters protecting them, and there are even 7 mythic realm experts. They all try to chase them away, but they were all chased back. Yin Yang also took a close look at that person, and I don't know how strong he is. Zhongsho broke out into a laugh. Just looking at the intent gathered on the giant knife, that person wasn't someone a martial master could fight against. Even Zhao Yanran, that day, was far from enough. Ling Yun Long Ruo, who was already at the Day Wandering Realm, also didn't have the ability. Only knowing how to use strength to suppress people. Chu Shui scoffed coldly, fighting for justice. This person is too reckless. Why did he choose this place to block everyone's path? The cloud-crossing carriage could fly 100 feet into the air, and it could barely be considered an all-terrain road, so they didn't need to purposely choose a place to cross the river. However, if they wanted to change a path, they would need to spend some time. Those carriages were even worse. If they couldn't pass here, they would have to take a 10-day detour. After all, this place was the wilderness, and if they stayed for too long, they would attract beast hordes. Zhongsho didn't need to worry too much about the beast hordes. With that person there, even the slightly smarter beasts wouldn't get close. However, he couldn't afford to waste time now. Thinking about it for a moment, he shook his head. Let's take a detour. Others can't do anything to this person. Yin Yang nodded his head silently. This matter had nothing to do with them, and at most, they would have to walk for half a day. Just as he was about to change the direction of the carriage, he suddenly heard a commotion in front. Only to see those carriage drivers and martial masters all raging with emotions. Some bold people even scolded out. "You brat, do you know how much business we will lose if we delay here for a day? Brat, if you know what's good for you, scram." If you want to comprehend the martial path, then go elsewhere. Don't block this place. Chapter 63. Not only were they scolding, but 7 Meridian mythic masters also came out of the carriages. That was 2 more people than Yin Yang had heard about. Their expressions were dark and sunken as they looked towards the riverside. They led tens of martial masters to stand off against the tens of people dressed like servants. The situation on the other side of the river was the same, swords drawn and ready to be drawn. Zhongsho smiled to himself. He knew that these merchants felt that they had gathered enough strength and were ready to cause trouble. Actually, although those servants were not bad, the most problematic one was the person beside the waterfall. This time, they were most probably asking to be humiliated. As expected, after a short moment of ruckus, the man beside the giant knife was annoyed. He directly scoffed coldly, causing the air within tens of thousands of feet to shake. That giant knife rose into the air without any warning, directly stabbing into the mouth of the river. A vast mountain-like intent suppressed the 2 sides of the riverside. Normal people only had a rough understanding of the martial path and didn't feel much. However, those martial masters all felt their bodies tremble. A few mythic masters' faces flushed red and then turned ashen white. Some of the weaker ones even half knelt on the ground, their eyes filled with fear. Scram, Old Lay, have traveled all over the 5 cloud continents to comprehend knife intent. Today, I just made some progress and was disturbed by you all. Do you all not want to live anymore? His voice was like thunder, causing a rumbling sound wave. The owner of the giant knife seemed to be really annoyed. He forcefully suppressed it and said, "Within 10 days, you are not allowed to pass." He waved his sleeves and hundreds of beast crystals were thrown over. Who cares how much you all lost? These should be enough to make up for it. Anyways, you are only allowed to come over half a month later. Those martial masters and carriage drivers were all speechless. They roughly knew what kind of person they had offended. To be able to control such a giant knife, if he was a spirit master, he was at least out of body realm. If he was a martial master, he was at least ascended realm. When they heard those words, they all turned around and left like they had been pardoned. In just a moment, those hundreds of carriages all turned around. Leaving a trail of dust behind him, he looked back and ran. Zhongsho also received a beast crystal that was thrown to him. Upon closer inspection, it was a rank 2 water-type beast crystal. His eyes flashed, thinking that this person was quite generous. A grade 2 beast crystal was worth 10,000 silver. No matter how great the loss was, it could be compensated. Looking at the expressions of those merchants, besides being frightened, there was also a hint of joy. It was obvious that they had gained a lot. Zhongsho could not help but secretly praise him, thinking that this person was not bad. He clearly had peerless martial prowess, but he was still able to restrain himself and not abuse it. The little bit of disgust from before also disappeared without a trace. Occupying the ferry and not allowing anyone to pass was a little overbearing. However, not only did he not take revenge on those who insulted him, he even took out beast crystals to compensate them. No matter what, such a temperament could not be considered too bad. Yin Yang rode the 18 cloud crossing foals and started her around. After walking 1,000 feet, Chu Shui asked curiously, "Prince, that person said that he was comprehending knife intent. Is it similar to the sword intent that you and Uncle Ian talked about? Can one comprehend it just by looking at the mountains and rivers?" Pretty much. When the martial path is at the beginning, one can have rhythm. When the rhythm reaches the extreme, one can give rise to strength. And the extreme of strength is the intent. The martial path intent can be split into sword intent, knife intent, and fist intent. Actually, they are roughly similar. Only weapons, fists, and legs have different shapes and characteristics, which is why there are some differences between them. Anyways, at this stage, it is a top martial path. This person said that he has traveled to hundreds of mountains and rivers, so his martial path intent must be related to mountains and rivers. Zhongsho did not think too much, casually explaining. following which he felt a little helpless. Our luck is too good to actually bump into an ascended expert in this place. Chu Shui's eyes lit up. That demon girl said that the prince's sword path is one with the spirit, knowing 3 types of sword intents. This person is still comprehending that knife intent. Doesn't that mean he is not as good as young master? Zhong Shaoxin's heart jumped, instinctively wanting to cover Chu Shui's mouth. An ascended expert, even if they entered a meditative state, could hear within 20 miles. They were still 10,000 feet away, so how could they casually say such things? He had taken advantage of the cloud-soaring sect. Forcing Zhao Yinran back was something he had no choice but to do. For such an expert, at his current stage, it was best if he did not offend him. However, before he did anything, an exclamation spread out from beside the river. Sword path one with the spirit? Little brother, please come over for a chat. Zhong Shou's brows were already furrowed. He sat on the roof of the carriage with a numb expression, acting like he did not hear anything. However, in the next moment, there was a majestic force that grabbed towards this side. Not only was the cloud-crossing carriage unable to move, Zhong Shou was also sucked up. After a round of dizziness, he arrived beside the waterfall and stood in front of the owner of the giant knife. Prince, Yin Yang cried out in alarm. He abandoned the cloud-crossing carriage and chased after them like a bolt of lightning. In a few breaths, he crossed 10,000 feet. After taking out the knife, a flame flashed and forced the few servants away. However, before he even got close, that 100-foot giant knife gave out a long ring, and a strong intent pressed down. Yin Yang's body was tossed back, retreating hundreds of feet before he was able to stabilize himself. Using the knife to support himself, his face was ashen white. Under the pressure of that intent, he barely held on and didn't kneel down. Zhong Shou's gaze changed, but he didn't stop him. Looking carefully, he noticed that this person was actually really young. He was around 20 years old, his features were well-proportioned, and he should be a really handsome person. However, he didn't care about his appearance. His face was covered in a beard like steel needles. His body was muscular, his eyes sharp, and his aura was really domineering. For some reason, he felt a sense of closeness. Who knows if it was because of the intent within the knife. The owner of the giant knife also sized up Zhong Shou, asking, "Someone said that your sword path is one with the spirit? I wonder which famous martial artist in Donglin Cloud Continent said that." Zhong Shou felt his head hurt, but he knew that these top experts hated being lied to. He took in a deep breath and directly replied, "A while ago, I met Zhao Yinran from Seven Spirits Sect. It's her." The owner of the giant knife was slightly shocked, but then he calmed down. Although that little girl's ability is a little weak, her eyesight won't be wrong. But you, young man, are only 13 years old. She said that your sword path is one with the spirit, knowing 3 sword intents. Is that little girl crazy? Or are you the disciple of some spiritual grandmaster? No, you're only at the martial master realm and also have a dual meridian body. Zhong Shou smiled and didn't speak. Who cares what this person thought? Anyways, he wouldn't offend him. However, in the next moment, the owner of the giant knife suddenly shook his head. Forget it. Since she praised you like that, then even if her words are a little exaggerated, you must have some ability in the martial path. Right now, I, Old Lei, need someone to help me evaluate. As he spoke, the owner of the giant knife slashed out with his palm. Without any sound, 2 huge saber marks appeared on a huge rock 100 meters away, following which he pointed to the giant mountain and the waterfall in the east. What do you think of this mountain and water? What do you think of my knife intent? Zhong Shaoxin had already sighed hundreds of times in his heart. At this moment, he didn't dare to not deal with it, forcing himself to focus and take a close look. Following which he shook his head. This mountain is a mountain. The mountain is like a mirror. This water is water. The water is like a waterfall. As for this knife intent, there are too many marks, and it isn't worth mentioning. You obviously know what you are doing, so why do you need to ask me? The face of the owner of the giant knife instantly turned green. Chapter 64. You're quite daring. Aren't you afraid that I will be angry and kill you? After staring at Zhong Shou for a long while, the owner of the giant knife scoffed coldly. However, at least you have some foresight and didn't lie to me. My knife intent is indeed too heavy. Zhong Shou couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He knew that he had temporarily passed this stage. This bootlicking wasn't easy to do. Sometimes it was better to speak the truth. Following which this person said dejectedly, I, Lei Dong, comprehended knife intent when I was 20 and was hailed as the top knife master in the Central Cloud Continent. I reached the Ascended Realm at 25, causing the various sects and factions to be tongue-tied. I was the top person in thousands of years and called myself the top knife master. Who knew that after 10 years of hard work, my knife technique didn't improve and instead regressed? My mountain and river knife intent is even weaker than when I just comprehended it. 3 years later, I will have showdown with that person. What should I do? I have already seen hundreds of famous mountains and rivers. I think it is useless to look at other places. Could it be that I, Old Lei, am destined to seal myself for 50 years and never come out again? No, rather than waiting for 3 years and losing face in front of so many people, why not in my life now? When this person spoke, he didn't feel like he was bragging. The more he spoke, the more sad and dejected he got. Zhong Shou was originally planning to keep silent. So this person was called Lei Dong. He had also never heard of him before. Among the heroes of the God Emperor era, just in the cloud world, there were more than 100 who could be counted. How could he remember so many? However, along with the giant knife owner sighing, the energy around him became unstable. It also caused the vital energy in his body to surge and spiritual energy to scatter. Ascended experts could affect heaven and earth with one breath. At this moment, just by sighing a few times and losing control of his aura, he was already unable to take it. With just a thought, Zhong Shou decided to draw his attention away. Taking in a deep breath, he shook his head and said, Since you know that your knife intent is too heavy, then think a way to change it. What is the use of feeling sorry for yourself? Change. Lei Dong raised his head and looked at him. Then he laughed. Easier said than done. You see a mountain as a mountain. You see water as water. But the mountain I saw was not a mountain, and the water I saw was not water. How could he change it? What would a mere martial master like you know? So that was how it was. The corners of Zhong Shou's lips curled up slightly. He knew that this person had reached a bottleneck in his martial arts. Moreover, if he was not mistaken, this fellow was definitely a loner. Ordinary martial cultivators naturally saw mountains as mountains and rivers as rivers. However, at Lei Dong's level, the mountains in his eyes and the water in his eyes all had a certain law. He could already see the part behind the surface. As such, the mountain and water blade intent was forced back. If it was a disciple of a major sect, with the guidance of a master, they would be able to overcome this hurdle easily. As for Lei Dong, he was stuck at this step and was unable to make any progress. Then, he hesitated for a moment, wanting to say something. Although he had the vast martial arts experience from his previous life, if he displayed too much of it, he would only incur jealousy. Ling Yun's sect was blinded by rage and had no choice but to do so in front of Zhao Yinran. However, when he thought about how this person gave out the beast crystals, to be able to see the majestic mountains and rivers and cultivate such a martial path intent, he definitely wasn't someone who was scheming and narrow-minded. Zhong Shou smiled helplessly. Forget it. Let's gamble on Lei Dong's character. Giving him pointers could be considered forming good karma. Anyways, this fellow only needed a few years to break through this barrier. How do you know that I don't know? I don't know why you don't see mountains as mountains and rivers as rivers. But in my eyes, the mountain is still a mountain, the water is still water, there is no change. Lei Dong frowned slightly, a mocking expression appearing in his eyes. He was wondering if he was crazy to say all this to a stage for martial master who wasn't even 13. A half-monster kid. Even if his sword path was exquisite, how could he know about such a profound martial path? However, Zhong Shou suddenly walked to the side of the giant stone with the two knife marks. Then he pulled out the pine-patterned wind sword and slashed out, slashing beside the knife marks. The giant stone was tough, and where the sword light shone, sparks flew, only leaving a few white marks. Zhong Shou wasn't discouraged, continuing to use his sword to cut the stone. Lei Dong originally found it funny, like he was looking at an ant trying to lift up a grain of rice that was tens of times heavier than his body. Slowly, his eyes turned serious, his body sitting upright and solemnly looking at Zhong Shou. He only felt that every action of this teen had a deep meaning. Even Yin Yang in the distance stopped struggling and looked at the mountain stone, unable to take his eyes off of it. His eyes were filled with shock, guessing that Zhong Shou was giving pointers to the owner of the giant knife. But how was that possible? That sword light was suddenly as heavy as a mountain, suddenly flowing like water. The majestic aura was similar to his mountain and water knife intent, using the sword to cut the stone until a shallow mark was left on the giant stone. The sword in Zhong Shou's hand was totally destroyed. Only then did he turn his head and smile. Your martial path must have reached a certain realm. I am just a small martial master and can't give pointers to an ascended grandmaster. However, I know that everything is different from what it looks like, which is why you have to be clear of your heart and see your true nature, not being confused by what is inside and outside. The heart has no place to stay, but gives birth to the heart. What is a mountain? What is water? Not moving, and everything is natural. What do you think? Lei Dong was startled on the spot. He stood there silently for a moment, following which the spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged. The wind spread all about, and within 1,000 feet, sand and stone flew. Even the huge river nearby was pushed to the side by the huge force. Zhong Shou cried out in his heart. Luckily, he was prepared and jumped away in advance. He arrived 3,000 feet away beside Yin Yang. A few breaths later, there was a thunderous roar and a deafening maniacal laugh. As expected, it is best if everything is natural. So what if I can see the true appearance of everything? My heart has a place to stay. When I see a mountain, it is still a mountain. When I see water, it is still water. He reached out with his hand, and the 100-foot blade buzzed excitedly as it flew into his hands. What is the point of looking at birds and birds? You wasted 2 years of my time. He slashed out, and a 1,000-foot blade light broke through the air. In an instant, it crossed 100 miles. There was a loud explosion in the distance, and a giant blade mark was slashed out on Mingjing Mountain, following which, another blade casually slashed towards the ground. Instantly, the river stopped flowing, and the waterfall reversed. The few servants here were still okay, like they were used to it. Chu Xue's face was ashen white as she looked at the scene in a daze. Was this the strength of the ascended realm? Yin Yang held his breath. An instant later, an even more tyrannical aura suddenly erupted. The surrounding spiritual energy formed a small storm. It was going up against the strong intent that was crushing over. Zhong Shou wasn't surprised and knew that Yin Yang was on the verge of breaking through. At this moment, after being suppressed for so long and being stimulated by the blade light, breaking through to the Xiantian realm was just a matter of time. However, he wasn't happy at all, his hands covering his face, feeling that he had no face to face anyone. 10,000 years later, this Mingjing Mountain, Fallen Cloud Waterfall, one of the most famous mountain and water shrines in Dongling Cloud Continent, was actually destroyed in his hands. If he knew that this would happen, even if he was beaten to death, he wouldn't have said anything. After Lei Dong vented his anger, he laughed out loud, not showing any signs of dejection. After turning his head, he first looked at Yin Yang, his face filled with praise. To be able to break through to the Xiantian realm at such a time. It was truly a good aptitude, and also a good opportunity. His foundations are deep. Although he is a little old, his cultivation in the future won't be a problem. Following which, he directly skipped Yin Yang and looked at Zhong Shou. The expression in his eyes was really complicated. Following which, he let out a long breath. That crazy girl didn't see wrongly this time. As expected, Your sword intent is connected to the spirit. Although your sword intent hasn't been formed, you have obtained the essence of the martial path. May I know little brother's name, and where are you from? Zhongsho's brows furrowed slightly, following which he bowed solemnly. Gantia Mountain Prince Zhongsho greets your highness. P.S. The book review section criticized me for being slow in updating, so I apologize here. However, now that I have used up all my manuscripts, I am barely able to write 4,000 words a day. If you have seen my previous few books, you will know that I am trying my best to improve with each book. Each time I try to write a story that exceeds the previous one. I know that I am not a genius at writing books, so I can only work hard bit by bit. Now I haven't gotten used to it, but in the future I will get used to it, right? Like Junlin, I didn't write quickly at the start and only slowly caught up. Anyways, I have no intention of keeping you in suspense. As for whether or not this book will be popular, it depends on the situation. Chapter 65. Gantia Mountain Prince, Zhongsho. I will remember this name. Lei Dong nodded his head, a warm smile appearing on his face. Today, the reason why I am able to have blade intent is because of you. Such a huge favor. How do you think I should repay you? Zhongsho wasn't a pretentious person. What do you mean by not expecting anything in return? That was bullshit. Since he helped others, of course he had to get some benefits. He took in a deep breath before opening his mouth. Even if I don't say much about this mountain and water blade intent, you will be able to comprehend it in half a month. To say that it is a huge favor is too much. How about you escort the three of us to Cloud Saint City? Half a month? Although I am just a layer away from the small success of blade intent, it isn't something that can be comprehended in half a month. It will take at least 3 to 5 years. Didn't I say before? This time, you aren't just giving me pointers, but you're saving my life. Isn't that a huge favor? As he said that, Lei Dong scoffed heavily. His face turned solemn, revealing an unhappy expression. Just escorting you to Cloud Saint City is enough. Are you looking down on me? Or do you think that my life is only worth so little money? Zhongsho couldn't help but be speechless. Saving his life? Did this Lei Dong really have the intention to kill himself? Wait, Gantia Mountain Prince, I seem to have heard of him before. Lei Dong's expression changed slightly, revealing a reminiscing expression. In the next moment, he shouted towards his servants, "The few of you, help me find an incense table." His few servants were really smart. In just a moment, they found an incense burner and a table from who knows where. Lei Dong chose an empty space, and after placing everything properly, he ordered people to find 2 wine cups, candles, sandalwood incense, and even 3 sacrificial animals. Everything that was needed was also present. Zhongsho on the other side was confused. He didn't know what was going on. Lei Dong pulled him in front of the incense table and then started to burn incense and pray. Heavens above, today I, Lei Dong, and Ganti and Zhongsho are sworn brothers. From today onwards, misfortune and fortune would be shared, and life and death would be one. If I break this oath, I will never be able to drink Miss Jean Rue's snow spirit wine for the next 900 years. Although his voice sounded heroic, the oath he made was rather comical. However, Lei Dong's face was constantly distorted. It was as if not drinking snow spirit wine for 900 years was an extremely painful thing to him. Zhongsho was startled on the spot. He didn't understand why they were going to become sworn brothers for no reason. What the hell was going on? Just as he didn't know what to do, Lei Dong glared at him. Why aren't you speaking? Could it be that Brother Zhong thinks that I, old Lei, am not worthy to be your brother? Zhongsho's breath immediately stopped. He could only hold up 3 sticks of sandalwood and make an oath in front of the incense table. The previous words were more or less the same. It was nothing more than living and dying together. The only difference was the last sentence. If I break this oath, then I, Zhongsho, will never touch books in my life. He wasn't willing to say things like dying a horrible death and never being able to turn over a new leaf. However, not being able to read books in his life was also a heavy oath. In his last life, he loved to read books. The reason why he still spent his days in the library after cultivating was because there were many books there, not being able to touch books in his life. When Zhongsho thought about it, his heart tightened. He silently regretted it. Wasn't this oath too heavy? How painful was that? Who knows, maybe that snow spirit wine was something that this fellow didn't need. When Lei Dong heard that, he laughed out loud. He patted Zhongsho's shoulder. So brother is an interesting person. Your personality suits my appetite. Not drinking snow spirit wine for 900 years, not being able to touch books for the rest of my life. We are exactly the same. He didn't control his strength when he patted, and it almost broke Zhongsho's bones. Luckily, he had some success in training his marrow and opened up many of his bone meridians, so he didn't spit out blood. Lei Dong didn't care. He took the 2 wine bowls that were filled by the servants and forced out tens of drops of blood from his fingertips. Then, he forcefully grabbed Zhongsho's hand and used a blade-like energy to cut his wrist and put the blood into the bowl. Then, he picked up a bowl and gulped it down. Then, he slammed on the ground. Today, Zhongsho and I swear a blood oath. The heavens can be my witness. From today onwards, we are life and death brothers. Zhongsho looked at his right wrist, at the wound where blood was spurting out. He wanted to cry, but had no tears. Swearing a blood oath wasn't bad. Usually, when one became sworn brothers, they had to do this ritual. However, why did Lei Dong just force out tens of drops of blood, and it was over, but Zhongsho, had to cut my wrist? Was this intentional or unintentional? Helplessly, he could only drink the wine in the other bowl in one gulp. At the start, he only felt that it was delicious and didn't feel like a normal wine. However, in the next moment, he felt like a ball of fire was spreading out in his chest. His throat felt like it was being cut by a knife. His head started to feel dizzy. What wine was this? It looked similar to white wine, be it the color or smell. It was no different. Why was it so strong? It was pretty much comparable to those celestial brews that were passed down in the future. Then, Lei Dong blinked and looked over in disbelief. This is the half-step shake that Miss Junru personally brewed. Just a few drops can make a man drunk. My cultivation is close to 4 meridians, but I only dare to drink 3 bowls at once. Brother Sho actually drank such a large bowl in one gulp. How amazing! Although Brother Sho's body is a little weak, but your spirit isn't something normal people can compare to. Zhongsho only felt really depressed. At this moment, he wanted to smash Lei Dong's face in a meat paste. A few drops could make a man drunk. Why didn't he say so earlier? Spirit your head. If I knew that this wine was so overbearing, who would be so dumb to drink it all? Just as all of his consciousness gradually disappeared, he saw Lei Dong's expression turn serious. His face was filled with seriousness, and his tone was filled with killing intent. From now on, you Zhongsho are my brother. No matter who it is, if they dare to touch you, I will kill their entire family. His words were filled with a sharp glow, like it was hiding an overbearing and sharp knife. The 100-foot giant knife that was stabbed hundreds of feet away suddenly buzzed, like it was resonating with Lei Dong. A vast and overbearing knife, intent suddenly swept all about. Zhongsho was startled, his eyes focused on Lei Dong, his lips curling up into a smile. Then his head tilted to the side, and he fainted. When Zhongsho woke up once more from his daze, Zhongsho was stunned. He realized that he was already in the cloud crossing carriage. He only felt an intense pain in his head, dizziness, and unbearable. First, his mind was totally blank, unable to remember anything. Only after a short while did the headache slowly fade away. Only then did he remember what happened before he was drunk. It was like he had become sworn brothers with someone and was plotted against a bowl of half-step shake, and he was totally drunk. Oh, I fell for it. Lei Dong, you bastard. Trying to bully the weak? Very good. This time I will remember it. I can't do anything to you now, but one day I will teach you a lesson. Cursing out to himself, Zhongsho looked out of the window. It was still a cloud-crossing carriage, traveling alone on the road. In the next moment, a beautiful person walked into the carriage. After looking at Zhongsho, she was delighted. Young master, you are awake. It is already the 4th day. You really scared Shui to death. Chapter 66. So, it is already the fourth day? Zhongsho rubbed his forehead in shock and sighed. The strength of his half-step shake was simply too strong. Just a bowl of wine, and he actually slept for 3 days and 3 nights. Then what about my cheap big brother? Where is he now? Sir Lei Dong is still at the falling cloud waterfall. After young master got drunk, he told us to head to Cloud Saint City the next day. Chu Shui shook her head. Who knows what benefits Lei Dong got from her, but her words were filled with respect for him. Following which she explained on behalf of Lei Dong, Sir Lei Dong said that he didn't purposely hide the matter of the half-step shake. That wine is beneficial to young master, and he has to drink a huge bowl. Also, recently he has other matters to attend to and can't travel with us. However, he will help us block those small fries. The City Lord of Cloud, Saint City coincidentally has a good relationship with him. Over there, young master will definitely be fine. He also said that you two brothers can have a good reunion in the future and that there is no rush. Benefits? Zhongsho's brows furrowed, stretching his muscles and bones. Looking at his body, he was instantly startled. His bone marrow was like a furnace. The last bit of Yin energy had been removed. It was obvious that his marrow training had succeeded. Apart from that, his body constitution had also improved, especially his bones, which were much tougher. He clenched his fist, and he could clearly feel that his strength had increased by 30% compared to before he got drunk, especially the conflict between his dual meridians, which seemed to have been resolved by a lot. At this moment, just thinking about it, he knew that the bowl of half-step shake wasn't just wine, but it was also a top medicine to improve one's body constitution and help one's cultivation. This kind of wine, which was close to celestial brew, each drop was worth 100 gold. Just a bowl of wine was worth tens of days of hard work. A look of gratitude flashed across his eyes. Zhongsho scoffed coldly. So he made me drunk. Zhongsho, have to be grateful to him and owe him a favor? Sir Lei Dong said that young master would say that. Chu Shui giggled, her eyes bright. He also said that young master is the most congenial person he has met in all these years. How strange. Sir Lei Dong had only known young master for a day and had not spoken much. It was as if he knew young master's personality very well. However, young master is really amazing. Uncle Ian said that Lord Lei Dong is already at the peak of the Ascended Realm. He is the pinnacle of our cloud world and once shook the central continent. It was truly inconceivable that the young lord could become sworn brothers with him. With this person protecting you, no one in Gantian Mountain will be able to touch you. Zhongsho's brow furrowed slightly. Being protected under the wings of others was not something to be happy about. Chu Shui was halfway through her sentence when she started to feel sorry for herself. It's all Shui's fault for being too talkative that day. If it weren't for young master's capabilities, it might have been a disaster. Hearing this, Zhongsho couldn't help but laugh. His 5 fingers formed a knife and lightly tapped her head as a punishment. It's good that you know. Just pay attention next time. There are simply too many experts in the cloud world. Who knows, one word from them might attract trouble. Although he was scolding her, Zhongsho was slightly distracted as he thought about something. Since they had already set off 3 days ago, they were probably only half a day away from Cloud Saint City. If that was the case, then that place was almost within reach. Still beside the falling cloud waterfall, Lei Dong sat by the river and didn't move. There was a giant crack in the Mingjing Mountain in the distance. On the river, not far away, the knife mark was already filled up by the river water. However, the scenery was still beautiful. Instead, it had an incomplete beauty to it. However, Lei Dong was not looking at the scenery. Instead, he was looking at a huge rock. Apart from the knife mark he had slashed out, there was also the mark Zhongsho had slashed out with his sword. The former was just an eyesore to him, and he couldn't bear to look at it. All his attention was focused on the latter, on the sword mark that didn't look like anything. Damn it, there's actually such a genius in this world. He is only at the martial master realm, and has only reached the sword rhythm realm. However, why do I feel that my brother's martial path is even deeper and indiscernible than mine? The sword intent within is similar to my mountain and mountain saber intent. Sighing, Lei Dong casually waved his hand, and an energy knife appeared in his hand. It was green-purple, and a strong intent surged within. After 3 days of comprehending, my knife intent power actually increased by 10%. If people knew that I was inspired by the sword path of a 13-year-old martial master, wouldn't they laugh to death? Mocking himself, Lei Dong's face didn't show any signs of annoyance. Instead, he was delighted. Ruatao, Ruatao. 3 years later, I, Lei Dong, will teach you a lesson. Just at this moment, more than a dozen sturdy black-clothed servants came over, carrying a long object that was more than 100 feet long. That object was covered by a giant red cloth, and one couldn't see its shape. A black-shirted old man was the first to arrive, bowing respectfully. "Sir, the thing you wanted has been brought over." Lei Dong's eyes lit up, waving his sleeves. The red cloth was pulled open, revealing the item within. It was a 15-foot-long giant knife body. It was hollow inside and was extremely heavy. Lei Dong reached out with his hand and rose into the air, rolling and flying over. Coincidentally, it covered the 100-foot giant knife. Then, with a light kacha sound, the well-designed mechanism was completely jammed. This knife also increased to a 15-foot length, looking really domineering. The knife intent and spiritual energy didn't decrease at all. Lei Dong casually waved it, but it was like picking up a needle, extremely light. Not bad, not bad. Although it is still a little light, it can still be used for a period of time. However, it is best to craft the next layer of knife sheath as soon as possible. A satisfied expression appeared on his face as Lei Dong placed down the knife in his hand, only to see the black-shirt man hesitate. In the end, he bowed. "Sir, I heard that 3 days ago you became sworn brothers with the Gantian Mountain Prince. Isn't that a little too much? I heard that Zhong Shou is on the verge of death and is a piece of trash who can't cultivate. Master is an ascended expert, and it isn't good for you to interfere in Donglin Cloud Continent matters." Piece of trash? With such ability, would he be a piece of trash? Lei Dong scoffed coldly. "So what if he is?" "I, Lei Dong, have already decided that he is my brother. Since you are back, you can make a trip to Cloud Saint City and help me take care of him. Although my brother has a few Xiantian experts protecting him, it should be Zhong Weiron's doing. However, it seems like these people won't be able to protect him for long." That black-shirt old man was speechless. After laughing bitterly, he didn't try to persuade him. Changing the topic, "Let's not talk about becoming brothers first. Recently, Sir has been too generous. A horse carriage was 1 grade 2 beast crystal. Even if Sir improves and becomes a grandmaster, you can't afford it. You don't have to bother about those small people. You're talking about using strength to convince people?" Lei Dong gave out a mocking smile. "Father said something right in the past. If you can use money to do something, why do you need to use strength to suppress it? You don't bring things with you when you are born, and you don't bring them with you when you die. Why bother so much? Although I, Lei Dong, do things based on my heart, but it is best if people are convinced. Although I don't fear them, why do I need to make enemies with them?" The black-shirt old man was speechless once more, thinking to himself that even if you wanted to use money to convince people, you didn't need to spend 10,000 silver on a carriage. Following which he saw Lei Dong smile as he looked towards the stone at the side. And this time, not only did we not lose out, but we earned a huge profit. Chapter 67. This broken stone could be sold for money? That black-shirt old man frowned, looking over in confusion. Apart from those 2 knife marks, he couldn't see anything special about it. Apart from that, there was a shallow mark. Who knows what kind of weapon made it? At first, he didn't care, but just as the old man was about to shift his eyes away, he was startled. A bright light flashed in his dry eyes as he looked at the huge rock again. Then, this old man couldn't shift his eyes away. However, this stone also depends on whose hands it lands in. In front of normal people, it is naturally worthless. But in the eyes of people like me, it can't be bought with money. Such a simple explanation of the mysteries of the sword. If this item was sold, it would be worth at least 200 grade 4 beast crystals. If it was given to my uncle who is searching for a successor, it would be able to extort a lot, selling a huge favor. Lei Dong said gleefully, actually getting more and more excited, slowly entering a fantasy state. If it was passed down to the future generations, then it would be even more amazing. In the past, the top knife god Lei Dong comprehended the martial path at the Falling Cloud waterfall before he mastered his knife technique. He coincidentally met the future sword god Zhong Shou, and they discussed the knife and sword path, which was why they got along so well and became brothers. Don't you think that such a feeling is really poetic and legendary? Oh yeah, this stone might be able to be sold for a sky-high price in the future. My children and grandchildren are lucky. I heard that when the knife saint was young, a marble stone was sold for 10,000 grade 4 beast crystals. What about this stone of mine? This is really putting me in a spot. Men, quickly carry this stone away. If it is hurt, I will hold all of you responsible. The black-shirt old man's face twitched, unable to say a word. After a long while, he calmed down. Sir, is this really left by that Gantian mountain Prince Zhong Shou? I heard that this person is only 13. 13 years old, and he has already seen sword intent? Why would I lie to you? When have you ever seen your family's lord lie, or even say half a word of a lie? And in the future, he is my brother. You have to call him second young master. Lei Dong laughed coldly as he looked at the giant stone. The stone weighed over 100 tons, and it took the combined efforts of several dozen black-robed servants to barely move it. But even after exerting all his strength, his face turned red and swollen. He still couldn't raise it. Lei Dong was helpless, thinking to himself that these fellows were really too stupid. With a swing of the 150-foot giant saber, the excess stones were shaved off in a few strokes, leaving only the 3 essential marks. He frowned inwardly. With Zhong Shou's sword mark here, wouldn't the saber mark he left behind seem a little weak? He had been completely defeated by his younger brother. If this was seen by future generations, wouldn't he be laughed at? It was a little unsightly. Lei Dong rolled his eyes and slashed out 2 more times. Stone shards flew everywhere, completely covering the original saber mark. Only then did he nod his head in satisfaction. Only then did the black-clothed old man come back to his senses. Then he sucked in a breath of cold air. In this world, there really is a 13-year-old person who can communicate with the sword spirit. This crown prince was really good at concealing himself. If that's the case, this sworn brother of his excellency will definitely have extraordinary achievements in the future. This old servant will rush over to Cloud Saint City later to protect him. Sir wants to give this stone to Old Master. Do you want to bring second young master under Old Master? Although I have such intentions, he might not be interested in it. My brother is soft on the outside, but tough on the inside. He looks humble, but he is proud and a little awkward. You can go, but you can't let him find out. Just follow him in the dark. I also want to see his ability. Be it if he wants to take the Monster King position or leave Donglin Cloud Continent. It's up to him. Lei Dong nodded his head and said a few words. He saw that the servants had already moved the giant stone, which had shrunk by 4/5 onto the carriage at the side. He walked to the river and shone his reflection on the river water, only to see that what was reflected in the water was a sloppy man. He couldn't help but mock himself once more. 3 years of comprehension, traveling to hundreds of sceneries in the world. Apart from those sceneries and sabers, there was nothing else in my heart. Who knew that in such a short time, I would become like this? If Miss Jinru saw this, who knows how much heartache she would feel. Sighing, Lei Dong actually raised that exaggerated 15-foot giant saber and used it to shave his beard. After washing up a little, he changed into another person. His aura changed once more. His body was still muscular, but his face was handsome and square, giving off a scholarly aura. His right hand holding the saber, he looked into the sky in high spirits, his saber intent wildly spreading out. Maniac Saber Lei Dong, who had disappeared for 3 years, had returned today. Who knows if those old friends in the central cloud continent were ready? Just as he looked proudly into the sky, Lei Dong's brows suddenly furrowed. Who is that in the sky? Is she using energy to fly in the air? In his field of vision, two small dots suddenly appeared. Looking from afar, it seemed like two girls were flying in the air. Coincidentally, he recognized the two of them. It's Taiyuan's sect, that old lady? Taiyuan Fairy Shui Lingbo. How did this person come to Donglin Cloud Continent? The person behind is Seven Spirit Sect Zhao Yanran. Suddenly, his heart moved as he thought back to what Zhongsho said before. The person who said that Zhongsho's sword path was one with the spirit was the latter. I was wondering why this old lady would come here for no reason. So as to find a disciple. Kiki, if my brother became a Taiyuan sect disciple, wouldn't it be boring? His lips curled up as Lei Dong suddenly rose into the air. A saber shadow suddenly swept across the sky. The reaction of the person in the air wasn't slow either. Her body flashed slightly, and she dodged. One of them was Zhao Yanran. The one in the lead was dressed in a red robe, her face ashen green as she swept downwards. Which crazy person doesn't want his life? When she saw the person charging up, Shui Lingbo's expression instantly changed. Maniac Saber Lei Dong. You don't have enough problems. You actually dare to come and offend me. I have things to do now and don't have time to bother with you. Scram. She suddenly used her feet to heavily step down, and another saber energy was smashed apart. Lei Dong laughed out loud. Today, my saber intent has reached the small success stage, and the 100 Dragon Saber has increased to 25. I was just thinking of finding someone to test my strength. Taiyuan Fairy, what a coincidence that you came. The saber shadow flashed and disappeared. In the next moment, it covered the entire sky. The saber light was like a dragon, pretty much covering the entire sky. Shui Lingbo's gaze suddenly became extremely cold. At this moment, Lei Dong's saber was like a landscape painting made of ink, unrestrained and unrestrained. Although there was no killing intent, that fighting intent was extremely strong. Her expression was as cold as ice, sharp to the extreme. She pulled out a red sword and stabbed down from the sky. The sword's shadow exploded, like a blazing sun in the sky. It clashed with the rising saber glow. At this moment, anyone who dared to block her could only die. Asterisk clang. Asterisk along with a shrill noise. Countless fierce gusts of wind suddenly burst out from the sky. The entire sky was filled with sand and stones. The trees on the ground were either broken or uprooted under the force of the wind. Numerous beasts and birds in the forest scattered in all directions. Zhao Yanran, who was not far away, was leisurely looking on from the side. Although she was unable to control the energy to travel, when she opened up a red umbrella, she fell down. Her body was as light as a feather as she landed. Just as she fell 4,000 feet, Zhao Yanran's eyes suddenly focused. She looked below at a stone placed on the carriage. Although the energy in the air was like a wave, it couldn't attract her interest at all. Her eyes were fixed on that giant stone. In the next moment, she smiled in understanding. So that was the case. With that person's personality, how could such a peerless treasure be hidden in the sand from the beginning to the end? Chapter 68. Weird. The spiritual energy wave just now didn't seem right. Zhongsho stuck his head out of the window and looked in the direction he came from. Just now, he had been meditating to strengthen his divine soul. However, all of a sudden, a powerful wave of spiritual energy came from afar. It caused his soul power source to be damaged. Luckily, the two foxtails behind him calmed down the nearby heaven and earth spiritual energy and made it calm down. At this moment, looking to the west, one could vaguely see flames soaring into the sky from that direction. In this pitch-black dawn, it was really eye-catching. Looking at the situation, did an ascended ancestor make a move over there? Moreover, there are more than two of them, peak ascended. Thinking about that, Zhongsho's brows furrowed slightly. The estimated distance was exactly 600 miles away, which was where the falling cloud waterfall was. No wonder Lei Dong wanted Yin Yang to bring him away. However, he wasn't worried in his heart, as Lei Dong was obviously at the peak of the Ascended Realm. In this era, even those spiritual grandmasters needed to hide in spiritual lands. An ascended ancestor was enough to do whatever he wanted. Unless he was ambushed by many same-grade martial cultivators or a grandmaster, he wouldn't be in any life-threatening danger. Even if he couldn't beat them, he would be able to run. Who knows which ascended expert it is? Lei Dong's knife intent is at the small success stage, just half a step away from the grandmaster realm. For this person to be able to fight with him and cause such a commotion, he definitely isn't a nameless person. This matter didn't concern him. Zhongsho shook his head and didn't care. On the contrary, Cloud Saint City was already in sight. Donglin Cloud Continent had a total of 50 provinces and 900 cities. However, they were all scattered and broken. Often, one city could be considered country. Half of it was due to martial cultivators being arrogant and having some strength. They weren't willing to be controlled. The other half was due to the many hidden sects purposely controlling and restricting them. Even the largest country only had 3 provinces, and they didn't have complete control over them. Cloud Saint City was also considered to have some power in the east of the continent. Although it was backed by the Sudian mountain range, it was located on a 10 million mu wide plain. It was also close to the East Cloud Ocean and had some trade benefits. When the cloud crossing carriage arrived at the city gate, the sky was still not completely bright, and the city gate was not open. However, there were already dozens of carriages parked at the intersection. Yin Yang had no choice but to drive the carriage to the side of the road. After waiting for a while, they suddenly heard the sound of thunder. A group of knights were galloping towards them. Each of them was riding on a cloud stepping foal. They were travel-worn and had sabers and spears in their hands. Their expressions were cold. Zhongsho did not care at first, but when the group of knights approached, he realized that the people leading them were Zhongling and Feng Xiao, whom he had met before. However, for some reason, their faces were covered by a veil, making it impossible to see their faces clearly. When the two of them saw him, they were also startled. Zhongling directly rode her horse to the window, looking in with a mocking smile. What a coincidence! Who knew that after we parted at Pill's Spirit Mountain, just a month later I would bump into Brother Show again. This time Zhongling is here to buy some cloud whale bones to make arrows. Why did cousin come to Cloud Saint City? Are you really planning to go out to sea? Zhong Shaoxin was really helpless, too lazy to bother with this cousin of his. He knew that the cloud whale bones that were a specialty of the East Cloud Ocean were really light and were the best material to make arrows. There was also fish glue that could be used to make bows. The various powers in Donglin Cloud Continent would send people to buy some every year. This Zongling's excuse was really good. However, the 2 times they met, the meaning of the words were pretty much the same, which was a little boring. Looking at the veil on this person's face, Zhongsho had an idea. Smiling, "Cousin, why are you covering your face? Is it because you can't see people? Is your face injured? Let me guess, it was done by people from the Lingyun sect, right?" Zongling's eyes opened wide in rage. A month ago, he was slapped by that Lingyun sect disciple, and he thought that it would be fine in a few days. However, who knows what vicious methods that person used, but the palm print on his face didn't fade even after a month, instead becoming clearer and clearer. During this month, he invited a few spirit masters to take a look, but they didn't know what happened. He also invited a few Xiantian masters, but they also had no idea. He had no choice but to cover his face with a veil. Zhongsho's words hit his sore spot. During these days, he had been guessing that what happened at the foot of Pill Spirit Mountain had something to do with this Zhongsho. Who knows? Maybe he purposely used the Lingyun Vermilion token to invite the Lingyun sect to attack and humiliate him. His eyes became colder and colder, and those cavalry soldiers all surrounded over. The surrounding atmosphere also became dark and cold. Zhongsho's eyes squinted, and he could feel that there were 2 or more Xiantian auras hidden within this group of people. Feng Xiao was more or less worried, walking over and tugging at Zongling's sleeves, using his eyes to warn her. Just as Zhongling was hesitating, Yin Yang, who was in front of the carriage, scoffed coldly. Along with an indescribable might, all the horses within 100 feet neighed in fright and quickly retreated. The expressions of Feng Xiao and Zhongling changed once more. Exchanging glances with one another, they both understood what was going on. They all thought that the Xiantian expert who killed Qi Xiao that day was actually this person. Zhongling thought about it for a moment, and then her face relaxed. "Cousin, you just need to be sharp-tongued. There has been no news of Uncle for a month, and he hasn't come out from the Oblivion Cloud Ocean. I only hope that after a few days, you can still laugh. Do you know how many people around here want to take your life?" Zhong Shou shook his head. He didn't need anyone to remind him, as he could feel the gazes around him filled with killing intent. He smiled slightly. "As for how many people want to kill me, I don't know. However, I do know that if I die in front of Brother Zhongling, Cousin Zhongshu won't be able to escape responsibility in the future." Zhongling was about to leave, but when she heard those words, her expression froze up once more, and she stared over viciously. Coincidentally, at this moment, the city gates of Cloud Saint City suddenly opened. A group of cavalry charged out of the city gates, but they were dressed in fresh clothes and riding on horses, giving off a majestic aura. The 6 people at the front were all Xiantian masters, riding on Zhong Shoshin's Windrider foals. They were covered in heavy armor, and their strong aura was not hidden at all. They galloped all the way to Zhong Shou's carriage before stopping. A middle-aged soldier stepped out. After he got off his horse, he bowed respectfully towards the carriage window. "Is the Gantian Mountain Prince Zhong Shou in the carriage?" Zhong Shou didn't need to think too much to know that it was because of his brother Lei Dong. He wasn't surprised, expressionlessly nodding his head and saying, "Yes." When the middle-aged soldier heard that, he was delighted. The city lord instructed a few days ago that the prince would come over today. "Our Cloud Saint City will treat him well and treat him like the city lord. Prince, please follow me into the city." His words paused as he swept around coldly, especially when he looked at Zhongling. His eyes were filled with killing intent. "Let me inform all of you that the Gantian Mountain Prince is an important guest of our Cloud Saint City. If anyone dares to have any bad intentions, they will be enemies with our Cloud Saint City. The city lord has said to kill without mercy." The group of cavalry didn't need any instructions, and they all moved their horses to the sides. They protected the cloud crossing carriage in the middle as they headed towards the city gates. Zhongling and Feng Xiao exchanged glances with one another once more, their expressions uncertain. They only felt that they couldn't see through this Zhong Shou. How did he suddenly have connections with Cloud Saint City? In the next moment, Zhong Shou popped his head out and said a few words to the middle-aged soldier. The latter instantly looked back coldly. "Are you Zhongling? Cloud Saint City doesn't welcome you, and we won't do business with you." Scram! Zhongling's face, which was hidden behind the veil, instantly turned green. "P.S. Thanks to everyone's support, I didn't drop off the new books list last week without any recommendations. Thank you." Chapter 69. Only when they entered the city did Zhong Shou find out that the Cloud Saint City Lord wasn't in the city. The person in charge within the city was someone else. However, the martial masters protecting them were still really respectful and careful. Even those few Xiantian masters didn't dare to be arrogant. They directly arranged for the 3 of them to stay in a place close to the city Lord Manor. The area was heavily guarded, and there were even 2 Xiantian masters guarding it. They obviously knew about Zhong Shou's current situation. This was exactly what he wanted, and he didn't have to go and greet them. For the next few days, he hid in his room. Occasionally, he would ask Yin Yang and Chu Shui to do things, and he wouldn't go out at all. First, he drew up some diagrams and asked Yin Yang to find the only weapon shop in the city that had 8 high-grade spirit blacksmiths. He ordered another 50 talisman knives, as well as some weird parts, herbs, and pill furnaces. This time, the talisman knives he wanted could all be considered high-grade talisman weapons. Even if he had all the materials, With 8 high-grade spirit blacksmiths working together, it would take at least half a month to complete the forging and get the goods. However, the latter could be completed in just a few days. He made another list and bought some pills, some metals and bones of elite beasts to feed Little Gold. Apart from that, he also bought dozens of books that he couldn't understand. Then he practiced the great blazing sun fist all day. Without the help of pills, Zhongsho bought a few bottles of cloud whale essence oil and rubbed it on his body. Although the cloud whale was called a whale, it could fly freely in the air and roam the cloud ocean in the east. Its wings were short and small, and its flying speed was far from that of a bird. However, its body was huge, and in the cloud ocean, apart from the whaling ships of the human race, it had no natural enemies. Its bones were extremely light, but they were as hard as steel, extremely sturdy. This cloud whale essence oil was made by taking the oil from its bone marrow and adding in some spiritual herbs. It was also the highest grade of bone forging medicine. The effect of the medicine wouldn't be instant, but it wouldn't have any hidden dangers. Every time Zhongsho smeared the oil all over his body, he could feel his whole body burning up. However, every time he took the opportunity to execute a set of great blazing sun fists, he would feel his body relax, and the pleasure was indescribable. However, the effect of bone tempering was not very obvious. Martial arts practice internal tempering, embryonic breathing, bone marrow, chi and blood, 5 viscera, 6 viscera, skin and flesh. Only bone tempering and skin tempering were the most difficult. It was difficult for the skin to bear force, so it was extremely difficult to train. One could only borrow the help of medicinal pills or use water to polish the skin to make it tough and durable. As for bone tempering, the bones were hard and dense. Even the power of medicine would find it difficult to penetrate. Ordinary spirit medicines are basically unable to. After training bitterly for 3 days, there was very little progress. Although Zhongsho wasn't discouraged, his thoughts of improving his chakra meridians faded. His soul power, on the other hand, was still growing day by day. With the heaven-devouring origin conversion technique and the heavenly mirror soul illumination technique, his soul power was growing rapidly. The last time he broke through was 20 days ago. However, in this short period of time, he had already accumulated to the peak of the soul observation realm. However, Zhongsho still wasn't satisfied. In 15 days, I should be able to reach the soul calming realm. As for bone tempering, it would take at least 2 months. It is still too slow. To have the ability to protect myself, it seems like I still have to rely on that thing. Although it is a little inappropriate to speed it up, I can't care so much now. This Cloud Saint city was just inches away from that place. Zhongsho also craved it. However, he was still able to calm down and continue to train his fist techniques and meditate to train his soul. He also specially dug out a breath-restraining technique from his memory to train along with the energy-leading technique and great blazing sun fists. This cultivation method was created by people in the future. Usually, one could lock up all the energy in their body so that it wouldn't be wasted. Internal breathing leading technique to activate the vital energy and train the bones did have some effect. However, the reason why Zhongsho trained in this breath-restraining technique was to prepare for that thing a few days later. It was an extremely important part. The cultivation method wasn't difficult, and he also had experience in his last life. In just a few days, Zhongsho had already trained it well. With just a thought, he could retract all the energy in his body. Even Chu Shui, who was learning along with him, could barely do that. Just as he reached the small success stage of the breath-restraining technique, Yin Yang finally took back those weird parts that he ordered. They were all crafted from the bones of the cloud whale, which was why they were all white. Each one of them had a weird shape. The runes that were carved on them were also really special. Yin Yang and Chu Shui looked on in a weird manner, suppressing their curiosity and not asking. Zhongsho's face was filled with joy, like no one was around as he pieced these parts together. Not long later, these parts were all pieced together into one body. It looked like a human skeleton, only the skeleton was slightly wider. Only the legs and waist were left. Apart from that, there was a groove at the waist. Yin Yang's expression changed. This is a mechanism technique? Although the set of bones in Zhongsho's hands wasn't as good as the sword puppet of Ling Yun's sect, it was still within the category of mechanism techniques. No wonder the things that he ordered before were so weird. I call this thing the wind-traveling spirit bone. It is a type of external bone. Zhongsho smiled, directly putting the thing in his hands on his legs. It was actually a perfect fit to his body. He also placed a grade 2 wind element beast crystal into the groove, activating the spiritual patterns carved on the cloud whale bones. Zhongsho only felt his body become light, walking effortlessly. His heart was filled with joy as he jumped up and down, all of which were extremely casual. Chu Shui didn't feel much, only feeling that it was a little weird. Yin Yang was extremely shocked, looking at it for a moment before nodding his head. It is indeed an amazing idea, really exquisite. Congratulations, Prince. Although Yin Yang doesn't know what the external bone is, I know that with this item, you will be able to walk freely in the future. Zhongsho's lips curled up. How could the design of tens of mechanism technique grandmasters in the future not be exquisite? The so-called external bone was one of the branches of mechanism techniques 10,000 years later. It could be said that it was developed to the extreme. Even a person who didn't have the strength to truss up a chicken could have the strength to lift 1,000,000 kilograms if he had a top-grade external bone. Zhongsho's wind-traveling spirit bone was one of the most basic and also the most common type. He purposely pieced it together just to use it as a means of transportation. Only today can I walk on my own without worrying about running out of stamina. However, this cloud whale bone is still a little lacking. It is still okay when I am rushing. However, when I am fighting, it is a little inconvenient. Moreover, the consumption of these wind element beast crystals is also huge. Zhongsho shook his head. Naturally, a top-grade external bone could be used for fighting. However, in the later generations, this set of wind travel was especially designed for people with disabilities. It was said that no matter what kind of terrain it would be like walking on flat ground. Even in the wilderness, one would be able to walk freely. However, what was sad was that he wasn't handicapped, but he was no different from a handicapped person. If he didn't have a carriage as a means of transportation, he would only need to walk for 4 hours before his stamina would be used up. With this item, he basically didn't need to use any strength to walk freely. Although it was much slower than a carriage, it was much more convenient. Although it is a little lacking, it is more than enough to take that item. Thinking about it in his heart, Zhongsho covered himself with a large robe outside. He covered the wind-traveling spirit bone such that one couldn't see any traces of it. He then turned his gaze towards Yin Yang. Uncle Lin, tomorrow I am prepared to make a trip out of the city with Shui. This time you can stay in the city and don't need to follow us. Yin Yang was shocked. The chair behind him was instantly smashed into pieces. He suddenly stood up, but before he was able to say anything, Zhongsho threw a few ancient books on the table in front of him. Uncle Lin, have you read the Great Desolate Sutra before? If you haven't, then you should know about this Cloud Desolate Ancient Records and Desolate Ancient Beast Sutra. Yin Yang's brows furrowed. The Great Desolate Sutra was something that all kids in Donglin Cloud Road had to read, so how could he not know about it? The Cloud Desolate Ancient Records and Desolate Ancient Beast Sutra were also widely spread. However, why did Zhongsho mention these few books out of the blue? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.